Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was a percent ninja. This is a first part of the story. If you enjoy this and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know. Before I start, please do support and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share with your friends and check out other videos on my channel. Let's begin this alternative reality. When it all began. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto. Kohona, Hokage's office, mid-afternoon. Sarutobi-sama, Jiraiya-sensei, Orochimaru-sani have called you three here today to inform you all that you are all going to be Naruto's foster family. The man known as the Yellow Flash of Konoha, or otherwise known as the Yondaime Hokage, said. What? Naruto is born already? Why didn't you tell us? Exclaimed the three renowned shinobi, who despite their reputation, was grabbing Minato Namikaze and getting ready to punch him for all he was worth. Minato shrank back into the Hokage's seat like a small kid caught with his hand in a candy jar. He is not due for at least another day. For Kami's sake. I was just informing you guys, no need to act so rash. Shouted the current Hokage. Oh, then why didn't you say so earlier then? Replied the snake Sannin, causing Minato to sweat drop at the Sannin's unusual antics. I was trying to do so, you baka, sighed Minato. The three shinobi in the room, excluding Minato, looked at the current head of the village hidden in the leaves in surprise. They looked at each other, then nodded. And pushed Jiraiya forward. Hey, why look so glum? You are gonna be a father in a few days' time, so you should cheer up. Ha-has, laughed Jiraiya as he lightly clapped his apprentice on the back. It's nothing much actually, it's my first time being a father. I'm not sure what I should do if Naruto was to start crying, etc. You know pretty much what I mean. You wrote the make-out tactics after all, including one which was based on me and Kushina's love life, replied Minato, without much enthusiasm in his voice. When Minato said, make-out tactics, it caused Jiraiya to grin widely, but his grin wavered for a moment after hearing the part about him writing based on Minato's love life. Sorry about that, but I just could not help myself. I am a sewer pervert after all, said Jiraiya, suddenly in his introduction pose, this causing Orochimaru, Sarutobi and even Minato to sweat drop at his antics. Anyway, back to the business at hand. I would need Jiraiya to go and maintain his spy network outside of Konoha's walls. This being so, as I would not want the world to know of me having a child yet, at least until he reaches the stage where he can protect himself from enemies, stated the fourth Hokage. Then, what about us? Why did you call us here, believing in speaking for the both of us? Asked Sarutobi, looking in Orochimaru's direction, seeing the snake Sannin give a curt nod, acknowledging his question about the both of them. I would need you guys to help defend the village in the case should the Kyuubi break free from Kushina. It would no doubt be going on a rampage if it did break free. Agree. Seeing the three shinobi in the room pale at the complications of the Kyuubi breaking free. Well, okay, then, what of our duties as Naruto-kun's foster family then? Asked Orochimaru, voicing the thoughts of both Jiraiya and Sarutobi. Sarutobi-sama would be Naruto's foster grandfather, seeing as both me and Kushina no longer has any parents, and that Naruto would need a grandfather figure to look up to. Is it alright with you, Sandaime-sama? Seeing Sarutobi nod his head in agreement, Minato continued, Tsunade Hime will be Naruto's godmother. If Kushina is not able to take care of Naruto, Jiraiya-sensei, you would be Naruto's godfather, in the case that I am not around to take care of little Naruto. And Orochimaru-san, you will be Naruto's god-uncle, in the case if both me and Jiraiya-sensei are not around to be able to take care of Naruto. Is it alright with you guys? Asked Minato, seeing the two of them nod their heads in reply. He then said, well then, you are all dismissed. All three nodded and sunshined out of the office, leaving Minato to deal with the paperwork that all cages regularly fought against. Sighing out loud, Minato Namikaze started on the stack of newly arrived paperwork. Konoha, night of Kyuubi's attack. No. We are too late, Sarutobi-sensei. Minato was right, the Kyuubi had indeed escaped from the damned seal. Orochimaru gave a cry of grief when he and Sarutobi arrived at the place where the sealing had taken place. Both Minato and Kushina were slowly dying, Minato from having his chakra slowly drained by the Shinigami he summoned for the seal NG process, and Kushina slowly dying from blood loss. No, Orochimaru, the Kyuubi had not escaped from the seal, but a man wearing a spiral mask with a Sharingan in it appeared, and forcefully pulled out the Kyuubi from the seal, and placed a genjutsu on it to attack and destroy the hidden leaf, but Minato Koi managed to drive the man. Kushina spoke between gasps of breath. Orochimaru, the man told me something before he left. He said that he was the leader of a group of S-class missing ninjas. Orochimaru let out a gasp when he heard the word Akatsuki. Minato continued. He also told me to be prepared to face him at a later time, when he comes back even stronger, as he claims that he had not fully mastered his Sharingan. However, it seems that I will not live to see that day. Minato became quiet at this, as he was thinking about his son. Akatsuki, Minato, this is big news. Akatsuki had offered me a position among them. If I was to leave Konoha, I told them I would consider the offer. However, I did not think of deserting the village at all. From what I have heard, the Akatsuki are gathering the tailed beast to do something on a large. I go and gather intelligence on them for Naruto-kun Sake. I just realized I love him as much as you do, seeing as I am his uncle after all. Orochimaru replied with a small smirk, but the smirk was a little forced. Alright, Orochimaru, you and Sarutobi go and work out a plan. After this incident, now is the most important part I got to tell you. Both me and Kushina allow you to perform experiments on him. But only good changes, that will not cause him much pain, as I believe he will need the Kyuubi's power, and all the help he will need to defeat the masked man who released the Kyuubi from the seal. Minato said, his statement shocking both Sarutobi and Orochimaru to the core. Kushina on her part, as she was going to die within a minute, just gave a sample nod, and with that, Kushina Uzumaki, the Red Death of Konoha, passed away with a smile gracing her beautiful features, or what most thought, as Kushina had just merely entered a coma, due to the trauma and blood loss. Damn it Kushina, why did you die before I did? Why? Minato wailed out with grief in his voice. After over a minute had passed, Minato finally calmed down. He said to Orochimaru, Orochi, did you get a team or any sort when you were offered a position in the Akatsuki? Orochimaru replied, yes, indeed, I was not offered a team in Akatsuki. I was going to be paired with Akasuna no Sasori. Sasori is not a bad guy, ha-has. Orochimaru gave a small smile at that. Akasuna no Sasori mused Minato. Well, could you get him to teach Naruto the skills of puppetry, and human puppets? I hereby, on my position as the Yondaime Hokage of Konohagakure, willingly give up my body, and Kushina Uzumaki's body to be used as human puppets for Naruto to use. Hopefully our bodies will help Naruto in defeating the masked man. And with that, Minato Namikaze died from chakra drainage, but before his life was completely snuffed out, the Shinigami he summoned, promptly cut his lifeline. Swallowed his soul. Konoha, 2 days later, Hokage's office. Orochimaru and the newly reinstated Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, had just finished discussing their plans on HIW. Orochimaru was to defect Konohagakure, in order to join Akatsuki in order to gain knowledge of their plans for the tailed beasts. So, you completely know how to follow Thora on the plan, right? Asked Hiruzen. Yeah, so I am really gonna become a mad scientist in search of immortality, to help Naruto-kun replied Orochimaru. Yeah, that's it, replied Hiruzen. Okay, I have started the process already. I will come back in a few years' time to start implanting the Akatsuki cells into Naruto-kun's body, so you will act as per normal, and regard me as a traitor to Konoha, and want to kill me at all costs, okay? Said Orochimaru. Okay, I get it already, now go and do whatever mad scientist things you gotta do. Hiruzen dismissed Orochimaru with a wave of his hand. I hope Orochimaru does not lose his love for Naruto, thought Hiruzen. Konoha, Orochimaru's lab. I hope Naruto-kun is able to use the cursed seal of the heaven without drawbacks, as this is the only thing that allows me to track him, and is not able to be removed. Orochimaru thought aloud. Time skip all the way to Orochimaru being found out part. Goes according to canon. A day in the ninja village Konohagakure no Sato, where the villagers celebrate a great victory and mourn the loss of their greatest hero and leader. For 6 years ago, the Yondaime Hokage Namikaze Minato defeated one of the 9 great demon-tailed beasts, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, who was destroying their village. This day was also the day in which a great tragedy had befallen on a certain infant, an infant who wasn't even aware of what was going on around him. An infant who the Yondaime used to defeat the demon lord once and for all. and it was because of this that the Yondaime forfeit any possible chance for the child to have a future in the village. One may ask why this was the case. Any person, especially an infant that aided in the defeat of Konoha's greatest foe, would surely be heralded as a hero, wouldn't they? Sadly, things were not meant to be. For the truth of the matter is that no human or mortal for that matter could possibly kill the Kyuubi no Kitsune outright with any skill they could possess. They simply lacked the power and the means to destroy an immortal body. So, how could the Yondaime, greatest shinobi to have been produced in Konoha, have killed the Kyuubi? He didn't, not in the literal terms anyway. The Yondaime, prior to his victory, spent an entire week trying to discover a way to slay the beast, but when he realized that there was no way to do so, he turned to his field of expertise, fuinjutsu or seals. It is common knowledge that seals are used to contain and hold things mainly, and it was with that idea the Yondaime invented a most fearsome technique that would put an end to the Kyuubi's reign of terror. The technique, Shiki Fujin, was designed to call upon the services of Shinigami itself, the death, to use its powers to tear the soul of the target and user from their bodies. The target's soul can be placed into any seal requested while the user's soul is devoured into the stomach of the death as payment for its services, where it will reside to do battle with its fellow souls for all eternity. With the use of this technique, the Yondaime ripped the soul of the Kyuubi from its body, destroying him physically, and sealed it into the only thing that could possibly contain such a monstrous spirit. Something so pure and innocent that it would be immune to the corruption the soul of a demon could bring, so long as said demon could not influence its host in any way. The Yondaime sealed the soul of the Kyuubi no Kitsune into an orphan whose mother died after giving birth and father died in battle with the enraged Kitsune. The infant's name was Uzumaki Naruto, the human sacrifice used to destroy the Kyuubi and save Konoha from definite annihilation. Before using the child as a sacrifice, the Yondaime had one last request: for Uzumaki Naruto to be seen as a hero, the very thing that stops the village from being destroyed, the very person whose mere existence is a reminder of why they are still walking, talking, loving, caring, and basically living now. Naruto's body was used as the prison for the most notorious prisoner Konoha had ever seen, and he was the warden. There is a famous saying that says that two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not so sure about the universe, and sadly, that statement couldn't be more accurate to describe Konoha's general reaction to the sealing of Kyuubi inside Naruto. Instead of valuing their beloved leader's knowledge and seals, skill and final wish, they instead transferred their hate of the demon to the next logical choice, the boy who contained it. Instead of seeing him as hero, who sacrificed his very own body to keep them alive, they saw him as the demon reincarnated who would wait until they are unprepared to pounce and finish the job it started on that fateful night all those years ago. It was so bad that immediately after it was leaked out to the public about Naruto's condition, the nurse who was caring for the newly orphaned child attempted to kill it to finish the Yondaime's work by strangulation. Luckily for Naruto, the Sandaime Hokage, who was newly reinstated as the leader of the village after his predecessor's death, arrived on the scene and arrested the nurse, only to cause more civil uprising for arresting an innocent civilian who only tried to kill the demon. It got to the point that Sarutobi, the aged Hokage, had to pass a law before the council that forbade mentioning the Kyuubi being sealed in Naruto on the punishment of death. This was in hopes that the villagers would leave the poor boy alone so that he could at least make friends in his own generation. That too was not to be. In his early years, Uzumaki Naruto lived in an orphanage where the caretakers would allow for the other children to beat on him, even indulging in on the activity themselves when they were sure the Sandaime would not notice. Parents would admonish their children for trying to include the monster in their games, to the point where the children began to hate him too for getting them into trouble with their parents. In fact, in the whole village, it seemed that the only person who truly cared for the abused child was the Sandaime Hokage, though others chose ignorance as a better way to deal with the problem, even if they don't think ill of him. Eventually, on his 4th birthday, Naruto was kicked out of the orphanage when the caretakers believed he was more trouble than he was worth. He had spent months on the streets scrounging from trash cans to survive until Sandaime found him and purchased him an apartment while giving him an allowance so that he wouldn't die on the street, a small mercy for the boy Kami himself forgot about. Naruto grew up with the hate of his home while at the same time, not knowing what he had done to earn such hate. Such a life caused him naturally become reserved, mistrustful, intelligent and cunning. One cannot live like he did and survive without having these traits. Things began to look up for Naruto though when with his allowance, he found a shop whose owner treated him like a person and sold him food. Ichiraku Ramen, owned by Kyuki Ichiraku and his daughter Ayame Ichiraku, offered Naruto a safe haven to eat with the money he was given by Sandame, if for nothing else than to feel loved and cared for. It was on his 6th birthday though when Naruto's life would turn upside down. He had gotten used to hiding on October the 10th, his birthday, for the villagers seemed to be extra angry with him on that day, where the beating he received would be at their worst. However, as he hid under his bed in the old, broken-down apartment which had graffiti sprayed all over the walls with vulgar language and insults toward him, broken windows and appliances, dirty and unsanitary water and spoilt food in his fridge, his apartment door was broken down by a group of drunk villagers, drunk from the celebration of the festival held annually to honor the dead and celebrate the Kyuubi's defeat. In a large group, Naruto heard them break down his door and enter his apartment. It didn't take long for them to overturn his bed and find him hiding, where they then proceeded to beat him, breaking several bones in his young body, stab him with broken bottles, tie him up and drag him around the village while the other villagers cheered and egged them on. This all ended when they got to the outskirts of the village and tied him up on a tree branch and proceeded to use him as a human piñata for a few hours before leaving him for dead. How could it be that all this atrocious behavior could be allowed to happen right under the nose of the very Hokage who seemed to care for his well-being? That was simple. At the very same time, a delegate from the hidden village in the clouds, Kumogakure no Sato, attempted to kidnap the Hyuga heiress, which required the attention of all the elite shinobi of Konoha, taking the attention away from Naruto for long enough for him to be beat to death. But no, death would not come to Naruto, for even though having the great demon sealed within him was a great curse, he was also blessed with gifts such as an abnormally large chakra supply, increased stamina, a perfectly fit body even though he should technically have died through malnutrition, and enhanced healing. For the Kyuubi's spirit was tied with Naruto's own, and the prideful demon would not have his container dying at the hands of mere civilians, not this day. It was this sight that the legendary Akasuna no Sasori, missing nin of Sunagakure no Sato and legendary puppeteer, found Uzumaki Naruto while he was attempting to infiltrate Konoha and get one of his spies to steal the forbidden scroll of seals from the Hokage's library. "What the is this?" asked a confused and horrified Sasori. As his large crouched body covered by a black cloak with red clouds adorned on it approached the seemingly dead boy being hung upside down from a tree branch with enough injuries to suggest he was tortured. Underneath the branch he was hung from, there was a massive pool of blood gathered, most likely from his wounds. What was confusing and unsettling though was the amount of blood there was, though. Someone of his stature knows a lot of the human anatomy, and one thing he knew was that there was no way there could be that much blood within this small body. He approached it more closely to examine the boy, poking him a few times to realize he was still warm and had a pulse when he gasped upon realization of who it was. "This is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki," he asked himself as he traced the 3 whisker marks on each cheek with his hand. "These pathetic village of monsters can justify treat a child like this. And I'm a wanted criminal for turning a tyrant of a cage into a puppet." Thanking Kami that it was physically impossible for him to vomit at the gruesome sight, a large metal tail rose from within his robes and shot out at the rope keeping the boy suspended, severing it, as he dropped into Sasori's waiting arms. "He is a sitting duck out here," thought Sasori. "Leader Sama will have found him eventually without trouble, and then these leaf fools would have caused their very own end again. I need to hide him where he'll be safe." Using what very little medical techniques he knew to at least seal his wounds so he would stop bleeding and leave a trail, he then cleaned him of all the dried blood on his body and wrapped him up in his cloak before leaving Konoha with Naruto, forgetting about his original goal for coming to Konoha. Training begins. Unknown location outside Konoha after Sasori saves Naruto. Disclaimer: I don't own Naruto. Naruto let out a groan when he regained consciousness. The last thing he could remember was being tied up and hung from a tree. By all means, he should be dead. Instead, he found himself lying face up on a hard surface with a small source of warmth coming from somewhere to his right. Looking straight up and opening his dull cerulean eyes, he saw what looked to be the roof of a cave, a dark cave. Sitting up, he saw that he was indeed in a large cave sitting by a fire while lying down on a pile of large leaves and torn out grass fashioned into an uncomfortable bed. The cave had numerous stalagmites and stalactites on the edges of the cave, leaving the middle wide open where there was some sort of workbench against the wall with numerous medical-looking tools and drills along with several scrolls strewn about carelessly on the desk. Suddenly, a shadow was cast over the cave, and whipping his head around, he saw a strange thing. It was hunched over, seemingly in a crouch with a black bandana covering his face. Its white eyes seemingly looking at him silently while the rest of its large body was covered by a black cloak with red clouds. "You're awake," he commented in a disemboweled voice, sounding deep and rusty yet with no malice or no other emotion either. Naruto just nodded, looking at the weird-looking man warily, who just nodded and shuffled over to the fire before placing down a dead boar, probably for them to eat. "What's your name?" asked the man, taking off his cloak to reveal the most bizarre body Naruto had ever seen. On his back there was an orange mask-like shell with a large metal scorpion-like tail protruding from the mouth, while his left arm had some sort of gauntlet on it, covering the seemingly wooden appendage. After he removed his straw hat, he revealed braided hair that really made him look bizarre and creepy. It was what he did next that nearly made the young and impressionable boy faint. A hissing sound came from his chest area as a small latch opened to reveal a door as a boy of no older than 15 or 16 stepped out. This boy seemed to be less weird, having good-looking pale features and messy red hair. He also had a black cloak with red clouds on it. "Well?" he asked again in a much more regular voice, losing that robotic edge it previously held. "Uzumaki Naruto," he answered, without much emotion in his voice either, before he pulled his legs up to his chest and hugged his knees, huddling by the fire. The red-haired boy seemed to take this in stride and proceeded to the fire so he could cook the boar he caught. The smell it gave off as it cooked made Naruto's stomach grumble, showing his hunger, though neither said anything about it. "Who are you?" asked Naruto, with a slight waver in his voice, letting Sasori know that he was still upset of what must have happened before he ended up in the condition he was in when he found him. "I am known as Akasuna no Sasori. I am a ninja," he answered, satisfying Naruto's curiosity for the moment. "What did you just do before, with your body?" asked Naruto, after a few more moments of silence. Sasori seemed to ponder whether he was going to answer or not before doing so. "As a shinobi, I am a puppeteer. I use my techniques to control puppets to fight my enemies. That over there," he said, pointing to the body he seemingly shed, "is Hiriko, one of my puppets that I control from the inside, that allows me to protect myself from attacks while being able to attack at the same time," answered Sasori honestly, not thinking the boy would understand anyway. Sasori was shocked to say the least when Naruto spoke up anyway, giving his own thoughts. "You use chakra to control your puppets and the tail then. That way you can control your puppets without worrying about getting attacked yourself while doing so, right?" Sasori was shocked, though you wouldn't be able to tell from his stoic facial features. This boy was what, 5, 6, and he easily understood the reasoning for Hiriko after just one small explanation. "Correct." Naruto, still hugging his knees though now looking at the discarded Hiriko, spoke up again. "No one in Konoha uses puppets as a shinobi technique. It would save chakra one would normally waste for ninjutsu to use to enhance your own limbs and chakra strings instead. I don't see why there are not more puppeteers." If the situation wasn't so sad, Sasori would have burst out laughing. Trust a child to see the advantages and wonders of using puppets so easily. "You are interested in the shinobi arts?" asked Sasori, with a curious tone. "I read a lot, it's all I was allowed to do," answered Naruto. Sasori didn't interrupt, wanting to hear the whole story. "I spent a lot of time in the library, though I wasn't allowed to take any of the books. I like reading the stories about Shodaime-sama, Nadaime-sama, Sandaime-sama, Yondaime-sama and other ninja villages. It was interesting." "Do you know who I am?" asked Sasori, genuinely curious, and his curiosity was piqued even more when Naruto nodded. "You're an S-class missing nin from Sunagakur no Sato, wanted for stealing several top-secret jutsu scrolls and fleeing Sunagakur over a decade ago." Silence lapsed between the two that lasted for at least 10 minutes as Sasori served the boar to the now starving Naruto and a cup of water from a bucket near the entrance of the cave which was collecting clean drinking water. "You're not scared?" asked Sasori, while they ate their meals, to which Naruto just snorted in amusement. "Of what? You could beat me, try to kill me, spit on me, and you would probably still be kinder than the villagers back in Konoha. No, I'm not scared. I got over being scared a long time ago, answered Naruto truthfully, sounding much older than he really was. Sasori nodded and continued to watch Naruto eat, not eating anything himself. When Naruto had his fill, Sasori took out a scroll, painted some kanji on it with a seal brush before applying chakra to the scroll, which then enveloped the leftover food in a blue light and made it vanish. Why? Spoke up Naruto suddenly, and Sasori understood immediately what he was talking about, even though he used one word to voice his thoughts. I work for an organization called Akatsuki, a group of S-rank missing nin whose goals are to collect the 9 great demon lords for the sole purpose to use them to monopolize the shinobi world and remove the need for hidden villages. Had I not taken you, someone from my organization not like me would have found you and killed you to take the demon you hold prisoner for their own uses. Seeing the shock on Naruto's face, then resignation, Sasori continued, from your reaction, it's to my understanding that you did not know you housed the demon inside you. The story your village teaches its new shinobi is a lie. The Yondaime did defeat the Kyuubi, but he did so by sealing his soul into an infant's body, yours. Impressed that the child hadn't broken down crying by now, he was about to continue when Naruto snorted, I guess it's better than thinking I was hated for no reason. They hate me because I'm the Kyuubi. Sasori showed his first sign of emotion by sneering, don't be stupid, boy. The Kyuubi no Kitsune was a demon of infinite power, one no mortal could kill. You are not the Kyuubi no Kitsune, but merely its jailer. Just like a scroll that has a sealed kunai in it is not a kunai, but a scroll. There is a name for someone like you, it is a Jinchuriki, power of the human sacrifice, fitting if the condition I found you in 2 nights ago was anything to go by. Naruto sat in silence, digesting all the new information he was given by Sasori while staring into the cackling fire with emotionless eyes. It was a relief to know that at least he was hated for a reason out of his control. He had assumed that he had done something unimaginable that he could not remember. To know that they were the ones mistaken and not he comforted him somewhat. I guess you're going to hand me into your superiors to get the Kyuubi then. How long do I have? Asked Naruto, with no fear at all, simply resignation. I never said I would do that, Sasori said, while he too stared into the fire. I merely joined Akatsuki for its protection. I do not share their goals for the shinobi world. However, I also don't care for hidden villages and how they tie down their shinobi either. I will not be responsible for the death of an innocent child such as yourself though, so you will remain here where you are safe for now, answered Sasori, shocking Naruto somewhat. Where is here? Asked Naruto finally, after several moments of shocked silence. This cave is where I work on my puppets and other creations. We are near the border of Wind Country, hidden by a powerful genjutsu at the entrance of the cave, he answered. What am I supposed to do? I doubt you'll be here the whole time if you work for an organization. Sasori nodded, what do you want to do? Aside from visiting the surrounding villages, that is, doing so as you are now is a surefire way for you to get caught and sent back to that pitiful village. Naruto asked himself that question now. What did he want to do? It's obvious that if he went back to Konoha by force or by will, he would most likely be lynched again by the villagers. If he went to any other village, now knowing that he had the Kyuubi in him, it probably wouldn't take long for them to realize it too and use him for it, so any hidden village is out of the question. That didn't stop him from wanting to become a shinobi though. He had no reason to become one though other than to protect himself. That wasn't great motivation to become strong, and progress for the sake of progress would just make him bored quickly. He then had images of the Sandaime Hokage and the Ichiraku ramen family flash through his mind before he smirked slightly. I want to be a shinobi, answered Naruto, which made Sasori raise an eyebrow in amusement. Then let Konoha capture you again. They'll let you become one eventually, he answered, wanting to goad a reaction out of him, which he did. Naruto's cold eyes met his own, shining with fierce determination. Sasori picked up a stick and poked the fire while thinking about this last predicament. Though he wasn't terribly fond of the boy or anything, it would give him some way to pass the time when he wasn't doing missions with Akatsuki, not to mention that if he decided to train Naruto personally, he could make sure he was strong enough to resist them when they finally discover his identity and try to abduct him. He was not crazy, nor warmongering, he just hated being tied down by the rules and laws of a hidden village, preferring the life of a missing nin. Should Akatsuki get a hold of this boy though, and the rest of the tailed demons, war would be the only possible outcome, and though he was not particularly adverse to the idea, it would also Escalate to the level where innocence would die, and he couldn't have that. I will leave often, for days, weeks, maybe even months, but if I chose to train you, will you listen to my every order in regards to it, or will you be an insolent child whining about not wanting to work for strength? Questioned Sasori. My training will not be easy. In fact, it will be grueling and taxing on you at the best of times, but to learn what I have to teach you, you will need precise control of your chakra, excellent stamina, high speed and high intelligence, all of which will require a lot of work on your behalf. Are you prepared? Naruto smiled a small smile for the first time since Sasori took him from Konoha, which made him smirk back. Just to let you know as well, since you are going to be training in this cave, time in this cave progresses a lot faster compared to time outside the cave due to a special space-time ninjutsu designed by the Yondaime Hokage himself. 1 week outside the cave is equivalent to 1 year of training inside this cave. But your body will not age while in here. However, the knowledge and skills you will obtain during your time here will stay with you. I will be training you for about 2 years in here. After I will have to go back to Akatsuki after 2 weeks in the outside world. After I'm gone, you will probably go back to Konoha to become a leaf. You go back to Konoha. I would want you to become the dead last of the academy so that you can hide your actual skills. If the villagers attempt to attack you, do not retaliate back, as it would only draw attention to yourself. Allow yourself to be beaten. I believe in your ability to survive as you have survived so far. My training will train your body to withstand such a fake mask of emotions to deceive them. After all, a shinobi's ultimate tool is deception. Do you get what I say? Sasori added. Hi. Sasori-sensei, answered Naruto, which made Sasori look up to the ceiling with a faraway look. Sasori-sensei. I like the sound of that. Orochimaru starts moving out. Please go and reread chapter 4. There are additional changes I have made to the chapter. It would probably affect the overall story plot. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto. The Hidden Leaf Village had been useful, but for Orochimaru's quest for immortality, there was nothing else Orochimaru could squeeze out of it, not counting experimental subjects, but those could be found anywhere else. He currently had an immortality jutsu that allowed his soul to take over other bodies, but it was untested and also not really immortality, as there was still a threat of being lethally injured and unable to find a new host. So Orochimaru had left, seeking another place where he might find the answers to eternal life. And he found, what he did not know about the jutsu, was that whenever he changed bodies, his other personality would grow stronger and stronger, and would eventually take over his soul, destroying the good side of him, and only left with the other personality, which was just plain evil. His evil personality had the ambition of taking over the world. It all started when he switched bodies for the first time. But, now that he knew of the consequences of his actions, he could not do anything to stop it. He had been approached by an organization known as the Akatsuki, a group of S-class ninja, much like himself. Their goals were a bit strange. All Orochimaru knew that they fought strong opponents in the elemental countires. They normally moved in groups of 2, there were regular pairs that normally wandered together, and special occasions where different pairs or even groups would be sent against a particularly strong foe. But Orochimaru wasn't really interested in the organization's goals or setup. The members took too much of his attention. Within them laid the answers he had yearned for such a long time. There was Hidan, an immortal in a literal sense, as Orochimaru had witnessed a fiend similar to a praying mantis had decapitated him, only for the head to start swearing about neck pain. Orochimaru had heard of the near-extinct Order of Jashin, and that its members could reflect the injuries they suffered to their enemies after going through a secret ceremony, but never had he heard that they didn't die with their victims. In their belief, they destroyed their souls in order to send Jashin the ultimate tribute, the soul of their foe. Well, destroyed was not quite correct, seeing that souls were indestructible, but they were shattered, denying them entrance to heaven or until they reformed. Once that happened, they were reborn without a trace of who they once were, as the law of gods commanded. The only problem Orochimaru saw was that once the head was severed, Hidan lost control of his body. Also, Orochimaru didn't know if the man was truly immortal, or just immune to a forceful death. The next member, Kakuzu, would solve that problem. He was Hidan's opposite. While technically mortal, he extended his life by ripping out others' hearts, allowing him to use their strengths, as well as add their life to his own. Orochimaru had no idea how old Kakuzu was, but the man had hinted that he'd fought the Shodaime Hokage. If Orochimaru could combine the powers of these two men, he'd have his immortality. But Orochimaru was greedy, so why settle for second best when you had a chance to gain perfection? The other member's ability would be a magnificent addition, truly creating the perfect body. His own regular partner was Akasuna no Sasori, or Sasori of the Red Sands. The two of them disliked each other, but respected the other one's skills and actually worked well together. Orochimaru was interested in human puppets, as it would give him an edge. However, he felt that he had better things to do than learn puppetry, not that that meant he wouldn't like his perfect body to be able to use fallen enemies as weapons. Another member that intrigued Orochimaru especially was Kisame Hoshigaki. Or more precisely, his sword Samahata. The sword could instantly devour chakra, and not only the limited amounts humans possessed. Orochimaru had seen Kisame shave all demonic and highly toxic Yuki off a fiend on the level of the Sanbi, without any ill effects on the sword. Unfortunately, the damned blade was at least semi-sentient, and refused to let anyone but Kisame wield it. The woman, Konan, did not interest him that much, but he saw the advantages in being able to turn into paper. It would give the expression being overwhelmed by paperwork a whole new meaning, plus nobody expected an attack to come from a pile of blank paper. And the idea was brilliant, Orochimaru would admit that much. Of course the leader's Rinnegan made Orochimaru's mouth water. The first of the Dujutsu, and the most powerful of them all. However, Orochimaru doubted he'd get close enough for a transfer, not that it'd do him much good. Pain wasn't immortal. Still, his skills in an immortal body would grant Orochimaru the strength of A. As for the last member, Orochimaru wasn't sure what to make of him. Zetsu was an enigma. All Orochimaru knew about him was that he could freely pass through solid objects, and cover great distances in seconds. Orochimaru had tried to copy that skill, but the results were moderate at best. Still, he was sure that Zetsu could do a lot more than he'd shown. Orochimaru decided that he'd try to get samples from them, while biding his time in hopes that other shinobi would join, so that he may gain more samples. And slowly and patiently, Orochimaru collected his samples. Ironically, the one sample he desired the most was the easiest to acquire, as Hidan left gallons of his genetic material whenever he fought or prayed to his. For the other samples, Orochimaru had to use cunning. Orochimaru looked at Kakuzu with calculating eyes. The man seemed annoyed. "Why did you call me, Orochimaru?" Said serpent smirked. "I have something for you." He raised a golden wristband with embedded diamonds into the air. Kakuzu's eyes widened slightly, then his left arm detached and shot forward, black strings connecting it with the main body. Orochimaru reacted instantly, pulling out his kusanagi and chopping the limb off with a single sweep. Kakuzu looked at him. "Are you trying to test my patience?" he asked, obviously annoyed. Orochimaru shook his head. Now, I never said it was for free. In return, I want some information. I heard rumors about an elemental bloodline in Takegakure, and as a former shinobi of that village, you should know." Kakuzu frowned. It was no secret that Orochimaru was interested in bloodlines, but to go this far. Then again, who was he to complain? "All right, give me the good and I will tell you what I know." Orochimaru raised a brow. "How do I know you won't just run off with this? It is pretty expensive." Kakuzu looked at him. "If I started to betray my business partners, the news would spread and nobody would do money-related deals with me." Orochimaru tilted his head, seemingly weighing his options, then he threw the wristband to Kakuzu. Said man pulled out a small magnifying glass that was placed on the eye, the likes every jewel dealer used, and started to look at every single stone. Finally, he nodded. "This is real. To answer your question, there is no such bloodline in Taki, and there has never been an elemental bloodline user serving Take in its entire history." With that, he shunshined away. Orochimaru waited a while, then he smiled. I know. He had been the one spreading that rumor, and it had served its purpose. He bended down to pick up a number of severed black strings. Amongst what Kakuzu had sent with his arm, there had been a number of loose strings, some of which Orochimaru now collected and sealed in a scroll. With that, the necessary materials were gathered, now for the supplemental ones. Orochimaru had paid a visit to Omegakure, Akatsuki's headquarters after Pain had killed Hanzo. Orochimaru had come to secure the corpse, which he managed, and look for the salamander contract. He had found that one as well, but it didn't do him any good. The paranoid ruler of AIM had sealed it into a tattoo on his arm, with a seal that required the man's own chakra to work. Still, having Hanzo's corpse could only be good, as it probably held a few secrets for Orochimaru to uncover. Sadly, the man didn't have a Kekkei Genkei, only ridiculous amounts of skill. The man had shown that he was a master in manipulating fire, water and lightning, and that he had been a brilliant strategist. Right now he was on his way back, but he was biding his time. Then he heard what he'd been waiting for, the flapping of tiny wings. He spun around and released a salve of Senbon that nailed the paper butterflies to a nearby tree. Orochimaru plucked them off the needles, then unceremoniously ripped them to shreds, although he sealed a few larger pieces into a scroll. He didn't have to wait long until Konan, the angel of AIM, appeared. She got straight to the point. "Why did you do that?" Orochimaru chuckled. "Kukuku, while I enjoy spying on people to learn their secrets, I hate being spied on." Konan looked him in the eye, then she slowly nodded. "Don't do it again. I have no idea why you want Hanzo's body, but be careful not to overstep your bounds." With that, she turned to paper and blew away. Orochimaru shrugged. That was one. Orochimaru looked at the floor. A giant open Venus flytrap was in front of him, a man's head and shoulders were sticking out of it, one part of him white as snow, the other one black as the night. This was Zetsu, spy and messenger of the Akatsuki, and he had just given him and Sasori their instructions. Orochimaru smiled and ruffled through Zetsu's hair. "You are quite useful, aren't you?" Then he quickly pulled his hand back, and not a second too soon. The flytrap snapped shut, sounding like a triggered bear trap, missing Orochimaru's finger by a hair's width. Then the two parts opened again, revealing an annoyed face. "Don't pat my head." Orochimaru shrugged. "Won't happen again." Then he and Sasori left as Zetsu sank into the ground. Orochimaru looked at his hand. A few strands of hair were in between his fingers. That was two. Orochimaru and Sasori were in the hardest fight they had had for a long time. Zetsu had completely underestimated the threat this beast posed. While their foe looked like an overgrown mix between a gecko, a rodent and a bull, it could manipulate the earth beneath their feet, making a fight difficult due to permanent loss of footing. Also, the damned beast sent spikes through the ground every now and then, trying to target their blind spots. Sasori was still in what Orochimaru was certain was a carrier puppet, considering he hadn't used a single puppet yet, and having a harder time to dodge. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Sasori took a hit. The strike had been a nasty one, coming directly from below. Sasori had no way of seeing it, and it pierced through the entire body, shooting out of the top of Sasori's body. As Orochimaru had expected, a figure shot out from Sasori's back. Orochimaru saw the true Sasori, what looked like a young man with red hair. Orochimaru was intrigued. From his information, Sasori should be older than that by now. Did the man find his own way of eternal youth, or did he simply have a baby face? Sasori spoke. "He nicked me. And of all the possible places, it had to be there." Orochimaru noticed he was holding his chest, a purplish liquid flowing out between Sasori's fingers, dripping onto a rock on the floor. Orochimaru smirked. "Looks like everyone doesn't bleed red after all." Sasori glanced at him. "Orochimaru, be quiet. This has gone on long enough, it's time for me to end this." He looked at the fiend. "You have taken up too much of my valuable time already. But since you grazed me, you will die by my favorite puppet." He pulled out and opened a scroll that had the kanji for 3 in it. With a poof, a man that Orochimaru easily recognized was leaning on Sasori's shoulders. The Sandaime Cage, the most powerful leader Suna had ever had, was now one of Sasori's weapons. Then the puppet opened its mouth, and a black substance oozed out. Orochimaru knew that this was not some sort of blob, but countless metal particles, and if he knew Sasori, the entire thing was poisoned. The poor critter didn't stand the ghost of a chance. Suddenly, instead of the earth, it was standing on a black platform that bound its limbs, tail and made a choker around its neck while lifting it into the air. With a short tug, the creature was hugging the square platform. All limbs, tail included, were stretched out, pointing away from its body. Then a large block of the black sand appeared above it. Sasori's finger twitched and the two black squares shot towards each other, squashing the gecko rodent bull in between them like a mosquito between two hands. Orochimaru walked over to the rock where Sasori's purple blood had pooled and dipped his fingers in the puddle, not without secretly pulling out a syringe and sucking up as much of it as he could. And I thought that between the two of us, I was the one who was into self-experimentation. Sasori looked at him. You don't have a monopoly on intelligence and willingness to sacrifice oneself for his work. Orochimaru shrugged. Perhaps not. He had what he wanted from Sasori, almost. He'd take the scroll Sasori made on how to create human puppets when he actually left Akatsuki, everything else would just raise suspicion. Getting a sample of the leader pain was difficult at best, impossible would be closer to the truth. Orochimaru had tried to get it, but he had found out that the Rinnegan had the ability to raise the dead, as secondary bodies, which meant that genetic samples from anything but the original body would be worthless, as the Rinnegan wasn't part of the genetic information of that body. But if that was the case, how could the revived corpse have it? What was different from before the corpse was revived and afterwards? Then Orochimaru had an epiphany. The black piercings on the bodies, he had currently seen too, must be the key. Orochimaru remembered that he'd seen the leader wield similar-looking skewers, and decided to one, just to see what it was. Getting it was easy, as the leader left the broken ones and the ones that were stuck in his enemies' corpses behind. A first analyze gave Orochimaru the answer he had sought. They were made of biomass, and while on first sight their main purpose seemed to be the disruption, a closer look revealed that they were receivers, sending their maker's chakra into whatever was stabbed, disrupting the flow of chakra while opening the way for mental attacks with no way to hit back. But these spikes had to be made of the one that channeled the chakra, and while Orochimaru couldn't check if they had the Rinnegan, he was able to do a basic bloodline test, and to his joy it came out positive. 6 down, 1 to go, plus any potential other members that joined. A hiss of pain escaped Orochimaru's lips when his short flight came to an abrupt end on a few trees. He, Sasori, Kakuzu and Kisame had been ordered to fight a boar demon that was terrorizing villages, for a price, of course. But the damn thing was tougher than they'd expected. The original plan had been to poison it, which was why Sasori and Orochimaru were present, and then just give it a workout till it croaked, but the oversized bacon had decided to make things difficult, as it just refused to drop dead. Sasori had retreated, saying that he didn't have anything but his poisons that would be effective against a boar the size of a whale, and that he had already pumped as much poison as was reasonable into the damn thing, and stated that anything else he had with him would not increase the speed of death by a single second. Orochimaru knew that Sasori had a point. He himself had also pumped everything he thought might work into the pig, and the demon had started to stumble, but it was not happening fast enough for the Akatsuki's tastes. Orochimaru had been knocked back by the last charge of the boar, covering Kakuzu, who was peppering the oversized piece of ham with all elements, leaving heavy injuries. The battle was coming to a close. Orochimaru jumped up and charged again, intent on getting vengeance for that involuntary flight lesson. He would call Manda, but as a member of the Akatsuki he had a hard time getting subjects for his experiments as it was, gathering the sacrifices Manda required would be nigh impossible. So for now, he was on his own. He jumped, narrowly avoiding the tusks, and plunged his sword into the demon's eye, before ordering it to extend. I'll turn you into wamiri, food cooked by boiling. Kaden. Yakuyaiba shakuueibu no jutsu. The boar squeaked in agony. As it was slowly boiled from the inside out, not to mention the blade going through its eye into the brain. Orochimaru jumped off, and the dying boar made a last-ditch effort to kill. It charged Kisame and thrusted its left tusk to his midsection. Kisame barely managed to raise Samahata in time to block the vicious attack. But the tusks were harder than he'd expected, as a few of the sword's scales were crushed, and one broke off and flew towards Orochimaru, who caught it inches before his eye. Orochimaru curiously looked at the broken scale, knowing that everyone's attention was on the animal, who had finally dropped to its side and died. Out of curiosity, Orochimaru channeled a bit of chakra into his index finger and scraped the scale over it. The effect was instantaneous. The chakra vanished from his finger, and the scale grew half a millimeter on an edge. Orochimaru smirked. Apparently, it was still alive, and Kisame obviously hadn't noticed anything. Orochimaru finally had what he wanted. After years of patient work, he had all the necessary ingredients, now he just needed to make it work. For that, he needed a base. He had found something promising in Ta no Kuni, soon to be Oto no Kuni, although he'd keep a number of bases spread throughout the elemental nations. He had Kabuto, his best spy, but for waging war, numbers were essential, and having bloodline soldiers would be even better. Kabuto had informed him that a young boy with a fascinating ability had contacted him, asking if Orochimaru, who despite his methods was known to get results, if he could be freed from his curse. What Kabuto had described was intriguing, especially if that curse could be transferred to foot soldiers, making them monstrous powerhouses. Orochimaru had in fact been working on a boost for his troops for a while, but without much success. Enko was the only survivor, but Orochimaru had lost interest in her when she had rejected him. The cursed seal just didn't work, but maybe Jugo's cells could change that. Little Jugo was S way of telling Orochimaru that it would soon be time to leave Akatsuki, but not after he had a look at its newest member to be that the leader had told them would be there by the time they returned. Orochimaru's eyes bulged. The new member was Itachi Uchiha. The man had fled Konoha after killing his entire clan sans his direct family, not counting the father. Orochimaru knew that the Uchiha were corrupt and for power, traits he respected and liked about them, as it made them predictable. And now the man with the strength to kill an entire clan whose skills were at least similar to his own was a member of Ajatsuki, and therefore for Orochimaru to exploit. Apparently Itachi had awakened something that had been lost for generations, the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. With Itachi, Akatsuki now had all the members the leader said they would need sans one. Orochimaru would only need to gather a piece of Itachi to be able to make a body that would unite Akatsuki's powers. The last member was still in the air, and the choice would probably take years Orochimaru could not spare. But to his dismay, Itachi was careful, and didn't trust Orochimaru at all, so it was impossible to get a sample. The young Uchiha was always eyeing him, waiting for him to do something that would give him an excuse to attack Orochimaru. And that gave said serpent an idea. Orochimaru grasped his stump of an arm. His hand was on the floor, in front of Itachi's feet. Orochimaru had taken Sasori's scroll on human puppetry and fled. But Itachi had intercepted him and in a short but violent battle, he had put Orochimaru through his Tsukiyomi after the Sannin had managed to give him a deep cut just below the cheekbone. Itachi had then used the involuntary freeze up to sever Orochimaru's hand with the kunai that had scratched him. He looked down on the snake man. "All your tricks are useless before my eyes," he stated. Orochimaru's eyes were filled with hatred. "Then I'll make those eyes mine." With that, he opened his mouth and the long tongue shot at Itachi. Itachi jumped back, preparing for an attack, but the tongue nearly wrapped around the hand and pulled it to Orochimaru, who jumped back and started to retreat. Itachi smirked. "If you're thinking about reattaching it, you're wasting your time. My blade is covered with a poison that decomposes flesh. By the time you're anywhere near a place with sufficient instruments for such a operation, all nerve endings will have decomposed. That hand will never function again. Jutsu are forever out of your reach. That one would especially hurt, since everyone knew it was Orochimaru's dream to master all jutsu." The man grimaced. "You underestimate me, Itachi Uchiha, and that will be your downfall." Then he shunshined away. Itachi returned to the lair and reported that Orochimaru had defected, and that it had cost him his hand. Sasori was still upset. "I don't understand what Orochimaru would want with that scroll. All it does is explain how to make a human puppet, something I decided to make should I ever have an apprentice, but for Orochimaru, it's useless. He's not a puppeteer, and even if he started to learn it now, he would never reach the level of skill necessary to fully utilize a human puppet." Konan rubbed her chin. "Orochimaru has the corpse of Salamander Hanzo, one of the few men he ever feared. Perhaps he wants to turn him into a weapon for himself." Sasori nodded. "Orochimaru is proud. I can believe that he would do that, and with such a high-specs puppet, he could reach the level of a good user, even if mastery of this art is out of his reach." Hidan chuckled. "Well, now that he lost the hand, I'd say the fucktard would be mediocre at best." Sasori looked at Hidan. "A true master of puppetry can move a puppet, or even multiple puppets, with a single finger. Also, if I know Orochimaru, then by some means, he'll regain that hand." Pain shrugged. "That man was always a loose cannon, but his services were excellent. We shall deal with him another time, right now we have more important things to worry about. Also, I found an S-class shinobi who may take over Orochimaru's role as Sasori's partner. Itachi, you and Kisame, your new partner, will recruit him. Use force if necessary. Orochimaru was in a wonderful mood. He had just encountered a blonde man with mouths on his hands that had the ability to form explosives out of clay. Orochimaru had been forced into a small skirmish, got a few strands of hair and some of the raw clay, and retreated, with the man being none the wiser. He had sealed it away, just like he had sealed away everything else he took from Akatsuki, including the kunai with Itachi's blood. The man had actually believed that Orochimaru had used that move for his hand. No, it had been for the kunai in the hand, but Itachi would have suspected something if he had just taken it. All my tricks are useless before your eyes, huh Itachi? In the end, you fell for it after all. Granted, I hadn't expected it to cost me my hand, but that's a small price to pay for your blood. With your Sharingan, gaining all the world's jutsu will be much easier, so thank you very much. Orochimaru actually had more of Itachi's blood than the man had realized. The kunai Orochimaru used against him had been a special creation of his. There were small holes in the tip, and the interior of the blade was hollow, covered in stability and vacuum seals. When the blade had entered Itachi's flesh, the vacuum seals activated and pulled blood out of his body. Not as much as Orochimaru would have liked, but any more and Itachi would have felt it. Now that he had all the ingredients, he'd find a suitable body, modify it to his needs and take it over. But first, it was time to leave the body he was born with, and move to something better. His perfect host wouldn't be ready that soon, but Orochimaru was a patient man. After all, he had all the time in the world. Years passed. Orochimaru had conquered the body of a woman from Kusagaker, the finest sword mistress the village had ever produced. She had been born with high chakra levels as well, which was a plus, but Orochimaru had chosen her for her sword skills, seeing that he retained the knowledge of the body's former inhabitant, and could take that knowledge and all skills with him, unless it was a Kekkei Genkei. The availability of the host's knowledge was vital, as without it, Orochimaru would be forced to go through extensive rehabilitation in order to get used to the new body. All in all, his jutsu was a success, and there were no signs of a rejection. Jugo was everything Orochimaru had hoped he was and more. Orochimaru had no problems extracting the materials needed to research the effect, and was hoping that he would soon be able to transfer it to others safely. He had also gained a number of followers, including the last Kagaya, Kimimaro. Unfortunately, that was where the good news ended. He had found multiple candidates for his new host, used a solution he had created from Hidan's samples, which he had the most from, on them, and waited for the breakthrough. He had seen that his formula theoretically worked, as he had used the same method to give Jugo's abilities to others. It hadn't worked until Orochimaru weakened the solution, essentially reducing the transformation capabilities to a single form. His first successes merely showed the patterns of their seals, giving them an increase in strength, speed and chakra, but failing to achieve his hope, since they died if forced to level 2. After some experimentation, he had found a way to safely allow his subjects to reach level 2. Unfortunately, his subjects had been stuck in their monster form, but his research showed that that was due to lacking mental strength, not a mistake in the formula. Many went insane, and Orochimaru resorted to locking them up an outpost, intending to send Jugo there once the process was perfected. But with Hidan's solution, there were no survivors. He was enraged, yet after 6 failed experiments with 50 subjects per experiment, he decided to save the rest of Hidan's blood, which would not last much longer, and instead use Kimimaro. The boy's Kekkei Genkei was something he desired as well, and Kimimaro was only too willing to supply him with the needed materials. Orochimaru considered using him as a host should the process take longer than expected. Yet the experiments with Kimimaro's solution didn't have any more success. Orochimaru was furious, and Kabuto, who had joined Orochimaru in his work and worked his way up to Orochimaru's right-hand man, was working furiously to solve the problem before Orochimaru forgot himself and ended him. Kabuto scratched his head. This wasn't good. Orochimaru-sama's patience was slowly wearing thin, and he had no results. It just didn't work, but he was too smart to tell that to his master. In the beginning, Kabuto had found it almost amusing that nobody survived becoming immortal, appreciating the irony, but now it was his own neck that was on the line. If it went on like this, Orochimaru might get the idea that an accelerated regeneration like his was needed in order to succeed. Kabuto had tried it, and for a moment, it seemed to have worked, but in the end it had failed as well. There seemed to be one piece of the puzzle he was missing. How do you get someone to survive something that has a 100% chance of killing them? Where do you find a person that doesn't die, despite logic, experience, science and everything else saying it should? Then Kabuto remembered that he in fact did know such a person. He smiled. This may very well be the breakthrough he had been waiting for. He hadn't finished his thoughts when Orochimaru entered, seemingly in a miserable mood. "How are things going?" he asked. Kabuto shrugged. "The latest batch has died as well." Orochimaru growled and reached for something. Kabuto didn't even want to know what it was, so he quickly continued, "But I have thought of something that has fairly good chances of working." Orochimaru raised a brow. "I'm listening, Kabuto. But your fate may ride on this, so choose your words carefully." Kabuto nodded. "I have tried using accelerated regeneration to make it work, and the results were better than anything else we ever got. But it wasn't enough. So I had the idea to use someone who not only has a regeneration equal or even superior to what I can do, but also possesses something that doesn't let him die." Orochimaru glared at him. "And where would we find such a person? What you described is a scientist's dream subject." Kabuto nodded. "Where to find him? Perhaps in the last place you would look, Konoha." Orochimaru snorted. "I would have taken such a person would he have existed there. I squeezed everything out of that village before I left, I even looked at Danzo's route." Kabuto smiled. "But what if that person hadn't been born then? It was here when Orochimaru's evil personality emerged and took over his thoughts and speech." Orochimaru's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Then it dawned on him. "You're thinking of the Kyuubi brat, aren't you?" Kabuto nodded. "The demon will not allow him to die, and if it sees what we inject as the advantages that they are, it might even improve what we give." Orochimaru nodded. "Yes, the brat would probably live, but what will we do once we injected it into him? Even if he gains the abilities, the demon would destroy me if I attempted to take over the child." Kabuto shrugged. "Suppose that we extract the demon before the actual takeover." Orochimaru frowned. "If a Biju is extracted, the Jinchuriki. Brilliant. With Hidan's power, he'd survive the extraction, and we could extract sperms for offspring just in case." Kabuto nodded. "That has the highest chance of success from anything I came up with so far. I could probably easily convince the child to join us, seeing that Konoha is making his life." Orochimaru chuckled. "Kukuku, yes, the most peaceful and kind of all villages, beating on an innocent child. We can't let that happen, Kabuto, now can we?" Kabuto smiled and pushed up his glasses. "Of course not, Orochimaru-sama. Shall I start gaining the boy's trust?" Orochimaru shook his head. "I have no idea if the Akatsuki is still onto me, so time is of the essence. We don't need his cooperation, just bring me the child, we have to get started as soon as we can." Kabuto bowed. "Understood." Over the first year, Sasori trained Naruto in his chakra control and building his stamina to the point where his control was at a level high enough to begin his training. As his reserves naturally grew, he had also began to teach him some ninjutsu that he had pilfered from various villages that would complement his abilities, such as the Shunshin technique, various clone techniques, and the basic academy-level techniques like the Henge and Kawarimi, which he mastered quickly and efficiently. Sasori had also begun to teach him about poisons and the human anatomy, so he could utilize his knowledge about poisons, and where to strike his opponents to cause the most damage. The blonde was so naturally talented in the field, he created his own technique. To Sasori's shock, that was incredibly ingenious. The technique was called Doku Bunshin, which, like the Cage Bunshin that creates a solid clone of the user with the use of the user's chakra, creates a clone of the creator. But unlike others, upon destruction, it lets loose a cloud of poison that will likely be ingested by the attacker. To create it, he had combined the principles of the Cage Bunshin and Bunshin Daibakua techniques only instead of an explosion when the clone was destroyed, he used chakra to create poison. "Naruto, stop training and come here, we have much to discuss," spoke Sasori to Naruto, who was currently doing his daily exercises. He may have grown fond of the boy, who was a pleasure to teach, but he would not baby the boy or grow soft, it would not help either of them. "Yes, Sasori-sensei. asked Naruto with a calm if not curious look on his face. He had been a bit excitable at the beginning of their training, but Sasori immediately beat that out of him. It was unbecoming of a shinobi to act like a child of all things. You have progressed a lot quicker in your training than I had expected, thus, we will move on to the next phase that I believe you will enjoy as a result, he began, cold and emotionless as always. Seeing Naruto nod, he continued. What can you tell me of shinobi techniques? Inquired Sasori, allowing Naruto to figure out what they would be training in next by leading the answer to him with a line of questions. Well, there are many types of shinobi techniques which can either use one's physical stamina or chakra to perform. Such examples are ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu and so on. One either learns stances and trains to master taijutsu, but normally, in regards to techniques, one would mold chakra in the way they desire to have the desired effect of the technique they try to use. Naruto answered, as best as he could remember, earning a nod from Sasori. Basing your next answer on your training so far, what do you think I would like you to train in next? Asked Sasori, goading him for an answer. You have tried hard to make sure that my control is as perfect as possible first and foremost, Naruto answered before pausing. You have also tried to sharpen my mind and increase my intellectual power, so I would guess that you want me to learn genjutsu. With a nod, Sasori decided to explain his decision. Genjutsus are extremely complicated ninjutsu that use that focus on using the chakra in your opponent's nervous system to manipulate their senses to your liking, allowing you to create phantasms that can cause your opponent to hear, see, taste, feel whatever you like. It is extremely difficult and deadly, but once mastered, you can defeat your opponents without using as much chakra as a ninjutsu technique would, he explained to Naruto. Naruto then frowned before answering. Couldn't someone who is skilled just disable the genjutsu and make it useless? Asked Naruto, and Sasori nodded, agreeing with his point. Indeed, but that will only happen if your opponent is more skilled than you, which we are trying to make sure will not happen. Genjutsu is about being more discretive than power, he began. You can also layer your genjutsu so that you can make it more difficult for them to break, or detect. Even though one can disrupt a genjutsu by releasing the technique or flaring their chakra, they must know they're in a genjutsu first, or have the sufficient skill to break out of it. Do you understand its uses? With a grin, Naruto nodded. How will I learn this, sensei? Asked Naruto, showing an excitement that Sasori only saw on the boy. Whenever he would teach him something new. That was why it was so easy to teach the boy. He would soak up everything he would teach him like a sponge, but he would also enjoy it. I should tell you, he began, that there is a certain individual in the organization I work for who is a master at using genjutsu, mostly because of his bloodline limit, said Sasori, getting Naruto's attention. His name is Uchiha Itachi, and his Sharingan allows him to have such a masterful control over genjutsu that he can sometimes perform them without the use of hand seals to mold chakra. It is one of the reasons why I am teaching you this. You will need this knowledge if you are to survive against him, explained Sasori. Why are you so certain that I will be fighting him in the future, sensei? Asked a confused Naruto, which was only answered by a pregnant pause by Sasori. Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame have been assigned to gather intelligence on, locate and capture you, or rather the Kyuubi no Kitsune inside of you, answered Sasori. To his surprise, Naruto just got an extremely determined look in his eyes. I may not have the Sharingan, but I will find a way to be better than Itachi. You said so yourself that as long as I'm better, my genjutsu will work right. If I am better, he will have a hard time dealing with them and I should be able to disable his. I will find a way to do so, sensei, he spoke, with fierce determination, making Sasori smirk. A year had passed like this, and by his 9th birthday, Naruto was able to perform Henge, Kage Bunshin, Bunshin Daibakua, Kawarimi, Shunshin and Doku Bunshin without the use of hand seals, and Mizu Bunshin, Tsuchi Bunshin, and a few lower-level genjutsus with just single-handed hand seals. No matter how hard he tried though, he could not do any higher-level genjutsu without the use of hand seals, even when using the training method he discovered with Kage Bunshin that allowed him to gain experience much faster by letting his clones participate with training and then assimilating their knowledge when they were finished. Sasori had told him that it would take years of experience until he was at that level, but he never was one to like being told he could not do something. A year of self-study with scrolls and practice on non-shinobi was all Naruto got when Sasori happened upon him training and interrupted him. You may not have mastered genjutsu in the way that you had hoped, but you have done so to an extent in the given time fat better than I had thought you would. I set you an unrealistic goal that would give you a determination to better yourself, began Sasori, while looking at Naruto's pleased expression. I am by no means telling you to stop this, but, we will begin with the next thing I am willing to teach you, said the puppeteer, getting Naruto excited at the prospect of getting stronger. What I will personally be teaching you now is how to use chakra strings as best as possible, and thus, by extent, how to be an effective puppeteer in combat, he explained with a smirk as Naruto let out a whoop of joy. The boy had expressed an interest in learning the art ever since he had shown him his own designs. One must begin small though, so you will first be learning how to create and control chakra strings on each finger and only then will we move to actual puppets, he explained as Naruto got into a seated position before Sasori, ready for teaching. With Naruto's excellent chakra control, it didn't take long for him to be able to learn to use chakra strings. Sasori began by telling him how to create them, by expelling chakra from his fingertips and controlling them with his mind. He practiced this control by using chakra strings to levitate kunai around his body, one at first but it then proceeded to 10 at a time. Sasori had told Naruto that though he was getting better at it, he would need to be able to control his puppets and by extension chakra strings subconsciously so that if he were to get distracted during a fight, the strings will not disengage, leaving his puppets useless. To do this, Sasori had Naruto dodging projectiles in all directions while using his chakra to both stand on a lake and control 10 kunai with chakra strings. The kunai were also not to be hit by the projectiles, so he was forced to dodge with both his body and chakra strings. Essentially, the exercise was designed to get Naruto to act as if the strings and whatever they are attached to are an extension of his own body. The next part of the training involved Sasori bringing out 4 of his old created puppets for him and Naruto to spar with, which Sasori always won. The point of that exercise was not winning though but rather learning strategy with puppets as well as combining them with ninjutsu and stealth techniques. After Sasori was satisfied that after a good year of training with them Naruto had a good enough understanding and skill with using puppets in combat, he went more into theory, or more specifically, more advanced puppets. Naruto, it is time I told you where the true power of puppetry lies. This also will reveal to you why I am in exile of my village, began Sasori after a grueling puppet spar which Naruto was able to last for 2 hours in. The famous technique that I use in puppetry is the hitokugutsu, or human puppet. The technique is exactly as it sounds too, it is the art of using the corpse of a deceased shinobi and turning them into a puppet that puppeteers like you can use. The process may seem grotesque, at best, but as long as it is not misused, there is no problem, explained Sasori, skipping the theory on how to make human puppets. I, unlike other missing nin, did not leave my home village of Sunagaku no Sato because I was forced, or committed a crime, I left because I wanted to. However, before I did leave, I assassinated the tyrant of a cage, the Sandame, and took his body with me so I could create a human puppet out of him. The man was a menace to that village, so I doubt they really minded. He was a ick and twisted individual, allowing the more ruthless shinobi free rein on small villages to rape and murder innocents, even going so far as to indulge on such activities himself. When I realized this, I killed by slipping him an unrecognizable poisonous substance into his sake and taking him with me, he explained, satisfied to see how disgusted Naruto was by the statement. A human puppet essentially, after it is created, retains the chakra, abilities and any bloodline limit they had in their life while still alive, but instead is controlled by the puppeteer, he said, seeing Naruto's eyes widen in shock. You see the potential of such a technique. The Sandame cage was famous for his ability to manipulate magnetism, and thus, his ultimate ability to control the iron sand, something that made him the most powerful cage ever to rule Sunagaku, regardless of how much a tyrant he was. He explained emotionlessly, pausing to see if Naruto had any queries. How do you make them and are they alive in any way, shape or form after the puppet is created? He asked, slightly nervous. To answer your question, began Sasori, no, absolutely not. The moment the person is dead, they are that, simply dead. The puppet works though by implementing devices within the body that preserves and maintains the chakra circulatory system. So, once all the entrails are removed, and the puppet completed, they are simply that, a puppet that can use chakra at your bidding. Seeing that Naruto still found it hard to understand, Sasori took out a scroll and summoned the puppet of the Sandame cage. Naruto looked on in awe at the floating human look-alike and was even more awed when Sasori commanded his puppet to shoot bullets of iron sand into the wall, just like the original could have. Naruto was grinning like mad before it turned into a frown as he thought of something. Sasori-sensei, what's the point of me learning the human puppet technique and how to create them when I don't have the corpse of a powerful shinobi to use? Asked a confused Naruto. Indeed, well, I came across a missing nin from Kumogakure, his name was Toroi. Toroi was an A-class missing nin, known for his magnet release jutsus. He battled me to claim the bounty on my head, and unfortunately, he lost to me, and was killed by me. Sasori explained, as Naruto's eyes opened wide with shock when he realized where this was going as he changed the grip he had on the scrolls to something bordering reverence. Before Sasori even allowed Naruto to try the human puppets, he took the bodies back and informed Naruto that should he want to try his hand at making a human puppet, he had to create 3 of his own regular battle puppets before he would allow it, and he only had a year and a half to do so. It may have sounded like a lot of time, but to Naruto, who was ordered to create 2 original puppets after seeing his sensei's humongous collection, this was a daunting task. For the next half a year, Naruto continued his training in genjutsu technique, stamina, speed and chakra control while he also drew the blueprints for and created his 2 original battle puppets Kami and Shinigami. The first puppet he created, Shinigami, was more of a support and defensive puppet with limited offensive capabilities, yet quite useful all the same. The puppet was much larger than Kami, with its limbs being thicker and stronger, while it had long arms, strong legs and a huge drill for a head. Also, on its back resided a large crimson kabuki mask which was designed to act as a shield, though it was quite scary looking, which worked to put fear in his enemies. Its main attack revolved around getting an enemy within the almost impenetrable compartment in its chest and uses the drill to bury underground where it would be highly unlikely for an opponent to escape. It also had a Senbon launcher on its forearms, loaded with Senbon laced with paralyzing poison, to aid in slowing the foe for easier capture. Unlike his other puppet, the torso of Shinigami was made of a lightweight yet durable metal, as to easily conduct electricity that could be created from the contraption on the palms of Shinigami's hands. Shinigami could either punch its foes, sending electrical shockwaves into the enemy's body, or it could pass electricity through its highly conductible body and roast the enemy within. His favorite and most genius puppet, however, was Kami. The puppet had 6 angel-like wings on the back that were designed to shoot poisoned Senbon from each feather, a high-powered flamethrower on each arm, a grenade launcher in its torso, and instead of legs, a large metallic and flexible tail that was also tipped with poison and quite strong so it could strike quickly at foes with it, defend, or bind. This puppet showed the most potential from attacking from the sky, letting loose grenades while remaining out of harm's way, or sending flames of death with its flamethrowers for arms. The Senbon launchers on each of the 6 wings can be controlled to shoot Senbon in 6 different directions. Essentially, Kami was wonderful against multiple foes with an excellent array of attacks. The materials to create the puppets were taken from Sasori's tool stash, and anything he wanted yet didn't have was purchased by Sasori. He had no idea where he would get such obscure items as a large drill or kabuki mask though. The end result had Sasori thrilled, and the field test was even better where Naruto made his first kill by raiding a bandit camp while controlling all 3 puppets simultaneously. He was a little sloppy and weak with controlling all 3 at once, but Sasori said that would get better with experience. Sasori had also made him mark his puppets like how he marked his own creations with his own mark, a red scorpion. Taking his sensei's advice to heart, he then marked all of his own puppets with his own sign, a crimson spiral, synonymous with his name. Getting the approval of his sensei in regards to being a proper puppeteer, they began their work on the theory behind creating human puppets, and it was quite grotesque yet fascinating at the same time. What it required was for Naruto to remove the entrails from the body and drain it of all its blood. Then, after peeling off the skin, numerous gadgets would be installed in the body to keep the chakra circulatory system running and retain the ex-shinobi's former powers. Sasori had to walk him through step by step after he was sure Naruto wouldn't throw up at the sight. When Naruto asked how he could stomach such a task so easily, Sasori just chuckled darkly and told him that he no longer had a stomach or any other human body parts because he too was a human puppet, having converted himself into one. With the help of Sasori, Naruto was able to successfully convert Toroi's corpse into a human puppet. Naruto had made sure to dress the puppet accordingly to give the puppet the dignity he deserved. He didn't dislike Toroi, as a matter of fact, he greatly respected the man. However, without proper preservations his body would have wasted away anyway. This way, he could use his body for good, which is something he was sure he would approve of, and if they didn't, well, he didn't much care. It was now 1 year since he began learning to use puppets. Since he began training, he had successfully gained excellent chakra control, increased his stamina immensely, his speed and evasion skills, learned several useful supplementary ninjutsu and creating one of his own, mastering genjutsu techniques to the point where he could almost do them without hand seals, learned about different kinds of poisons, strategy, human anatomy, geology, economics, mathematics, literature, strategy and history, creating his own puppets, mastering the use of chakra strings with said puppets, and created one human puppet from one of the most renowned shinobi in the history of the shinobi world. Sasori had told him that now was the time to start gaining experience against other shinobi, else he wouldn't be able to grow. When Naruto asked if Sasori was sure he was ready for combat against other shinobi, the man just smirked, telling Naruto that he already had the skills of a Junin and the only thing holding him back would be experience. Next chapter will be about Naruto gaining a little experience and Orochimaru obtaining Naruto. In case you readers are interested to know. 2 weeks in real world, after Naruto's training with Sasori. Well, this is goodbye Naruto-kun, hopefully we will not cross paths again in the future. Because if we do so, we will most probably be enemies. Remember my instructions when you return to Konoha, stay as a dead last, and allow the populace of Konoha to have their way with you, bye. Exclaimed Sasori as he shuffled away in his carrier puppet, whilst waving frantically at Naruto. Good luck and farewell Sasori-sensei. Naruto shouted while also waving his hand madly. Naruto waited until Sasori was a tiny speck in the distance. Guess I'll better head back to Konoha in case Gigi gets worried about me. Sighed Naruto. Naruto then proceeded to seal up all the leftover puppet parts that Sasori had left behind, all into a single storage scroll. He then sealed the storage scroll with the puppet parts into a large sealing scroll. This large scroll contained all his puppet-related stuff inside, including his own self-made puppets. He then sealed the large scroll into a seal tattooed on his right arm. The tattoo seal had the kanji for puppets on it. With his packing done, Naruto sealed up the entrance to the cave with a high-level genjutsu that Kurune and Itachi would take in minutes to get through. After he had sealed the entrance, Naruto then performed the hand signs needed for the Sunshin no Jutsu, and sunshined several times. After he had cancelled the jutsu, Naruto found himself outside of Konoha's walls. Naruto then grinned his trademark foxy smile, and disappeared from sight, only to appear in front of his house. This act was accomplished by using pure speed alone. Naruto opened his house door, and openly exclaimed, "I'm home." Datbayo, causing those who heard him to sweat drop and wonder where he had been the last 2 weeks. Naruto promptly walked into his room in the house and jumped onto his bed, and started snoring away, fast asleep. The next day, October 24th, Naruto woke up from his sleep. He rubbed his groggy eyes. He thought about what day of the month it was, and realized that it was 2 weeks after his birthday. Naruto shot up from his bed after sensing several chakra signatures outside his house. He then realized that a mob had formed outside his house. He then inwardly shrieked out words that would make Tayuya blush in embarrassment. This action, however, caused Kyuubi to chuckle inside Naruto's mindscape. Naruto then opened his door and scurried out, hoping nobody would notice him, but some of the more experienced shinobi in the crowd noticed him and shouted, "There's the demon. Get him." And with that, the chase after Naruto was on. Naruto, even though he learnt to be stealthy, his stamina was not at its peak this morning, as he had not eaten the day before, and his stomach was growling painfully. However, he kept running. Eventually, he ran around a corner, then hid behind a dumpster while the remaining mob members ran past it. He sighed in relief and crawled out behind the dumpster, only to look a white-eyed man and his 2 friends. Naruto noticed that the other two wore Konoha headbands, and his heart sank. He knew he wasn't good enough to escape those for long as he had just gotten back to Konoha, and had not started training yet, but he could at least try. He had just jumped up when White Eyes slapped 3 spots on his body and Naruto felt his legs buckle beneath him. He couldn't move his legs. And he had trouble breathing as well. He was so screwed. White Eyes looked at the others. I have to return to the compound. Do whatever you want with the demon. The other two nodded. Sure, thanks for your help, we'll keep him entertained. Then White Eyes was gone, and the other two gave dark chuckles. Naruto desperately tried to stand, but it was no use. The men started by kicking him in the ribs with enough force to slam him against the wall. Kabuto pushed up his glasses. He was not a tracker, or a sensory type for that matter. He should have asked to bring that new girl Orochimaru found, Karen was her name, to accompany him. While she didn't have a sample of his chakra that would normally be needed for a sensor to look for a person, it couldn't be that hard to find a child with more chakra than an ANBU that had traces of demonic energy to boot. But Orochimaru had been in a miserable mood because of the repeated failures, and Kabuto had decided it was best not to test his master's patience. And just calling out for him wouldn't be smart, since he would have a bit of trouble explaining to anyone who heard him what he wanted with a boy he had never met, and the boy wouldn't have shown up, not today. The boy wasn't brain dead, so if he heard anyone call his name on October 10th, the last thing he'd do was answer. No, he'd probably look for a better hiding spot. Frustrated, Kabuto gave the wagon he was dragging behind him a kick. Suddenly a peculiar smell reached Kabuto's nose. He'd smelled it for a while now, but had ignored it since he was used to it. But now he remembered that he wasn't with Orochimaru but in Konoha, and Konoha didn't smell like blood, and neither did the wagon he was carrying. Well, at least not that strong. He followed the scent into an alley, and nearly panicked at what he saw. There was the kid he'd been looking for, nailed to the wall by a number of blades. His limbs were carved open, and there were a few kunai shoved into his neck to keep him from screaming. The two men had obviously used him as a target for their shuriken practice. But what alarmed Kabuto was not that they had cut him open and stabbed his innards, but that they seemingly prepared to finish him off, as one had pulled a dagger and aimed at Naruto's heart. Kabuto's eye twitched in anger. He would so not go back to Orochimaru empty-handed. Before either man had a chance to react, he had pulled out 2 scalpels and sliced the first man's throat while he rammed the second one into the other guy's brains through the eye. Then he carefully removed the blades that nailed Naruto up first, before pulling out the other ones. He was fascinated when he saw that the boy's internals started to heal as soon as the objects were gone. Kabuto decided that while the boy would probably be completely healed in a minute, it couldn't hurt if he sped things up. After all, he really didn't want to be seen with 2 corpses. Then again, he might have a use for them. He sealed up the first body, then unceremoniously pulled out the scalpel out of the other man's head. He didn't flinch when the eye came out with the blade, and Kabuto simply flicked it into the dumpster before sealing the second body away. Then he focused on healing Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes, and looked into a pair of other eyes that blinked in surprise. Naruto jumped back, but immediately felt wobbly and went down to one knee. The boy pushed up his glasses and raised his open hands, the universal gesture for, "See, I don't have a weapon." Then he spoke. "I didn't think you'd wake up this fast. After what you've been through, I honestly expected you to be out cold for at least half a week." Naruto blinked. What was this guy talking about? Then he remembered the 2 men and looked around with a panicked expression. The boy noticed that. "Don't worry, those men are gone. By the way, my name is Kabuto." Naruto nodded. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. So, you convinced the men to leave me alone." Kabuto blinked and scratched his cheek. Sure, let's go with that. How do you feel?" Naruto looked down at himself. "A little shaky, but otherwise fine." "Did you heal me?" Kabuto nodded. "Yes I did, but you seem to heal pretty good on your own." Naruto scratched his head. He had always healed fast. "I guess I do. Thanks for helping me." Kabuto smiled. "You're probably exhausted and hungry. Here, it's not much, but have a bento." He pulled out a half-eaten lunchbox. Naruto nodded and started eating. It was pretty good, and Naruto finished it in under 15 seconds. He grinned at Kabuto. "Thanks. Nobody ever gave me something just to be nice." Kabuto's smile suddenly looked a bit sad. Sadly, that didn't change, since I didn't either. Sorry kid, but better you than me. Naruto looked at him. What are you? He noticed that everything turned dark. His last thought that he shouldn't have dropped his guard and judged the meal as safe just because it looked like someone had been eating it. Then he was gone. Kabuto almost felt bad for the kid, but he had no choice. And besides, he was excited to find out what would happen in the experiments. Now he had to smuggle Naruto out of Konoha, which was pretty easy. That's why he had brought the corpse wagon. The corpse wagon was a peculiarity of Konoha. Konoha didn't bury its dead inside of the walls, but outside beneath trees, so that the dead may become part of the forest that protects their village. The corpse wagon Kabuto was pulling belonged to the hospital, and they sent it out when patients died in operations or were simply brought here for autopsies before they were buried. That was true for everyone but the Hokage, who was laid to rest in a special shrine with his predecessors by a few trustworthy shinobi who never even whispered the place to outsiders. It had taken Orochimaru years to find the place, since the two trustworthies that he had caught had refused to speak, even under torture. But that wasn't important right now. Fortunately for Kabuto, an old man had recently breathed his last breath in the hospital, and Kabuto had volunteered for the job. Nobody had been suspicious, since while the work was something so harsh that it was used as punishment, the younger generations saw it as a fantastic dare. All alone in a dark forest filled with wild animals. The only companion a corpse. So everyone had simply thought that Kabuto had been dared to do it. Getting out was easy enough, the patrols checked his ID and let him go. Nobody expected him to be back for a few days, since the corpse would have to be buried at least 5 to 10 miles away, and the wagon wasn't fast. Also there were a few ceremonies that had to be done. Kabuto waited until he was far away from the village, then he loaded the unconscious Naruto out of the cart, put him in a sack and sealed up the whole wagon. Now he could run with the unconscious bundle over his shoulders and quickly reach the meeting point. From there, he would use a few underground shortcuts to quickly reach Orochimaru before the tranquilizer wore off. Orochimaru was impatiently waiting for Kabuto. The test solution with Kimimara's DNA was ready and waiting for the test subject, and so was Orochimaru. Finally, the door opened and Kabuto stepped in, a promising bundle on his shoulders. Did you succeed? Kabuto dropped the bundle, pulled off the sack and an unconscious Naruto Uzumaki dropped to the floor. Of course Orochimaru-sama, said Sanin nodded. Good. Then let's begin the experiment. Kabuto nodded, removed Naruto's clothes, placed an oxygen mask on his face, stuck a heart rate detector to his chest, placed a catheter into his arm that was long enough for him and Orochimaru to inject the solutions and nourishment from the outside and tossed him into the prepared tank filled with a clear liquid. Then he injected the first solution. Now all they could do is wait. From their past experiments, Kabuto deduced that they would have to wait half an hour before something happened. Usually then the subjects croaked, but Kabuto was hoping that that didn't happen here, or he'd be in a lot of trouble in a world of hurt. They left long before Naruto's body started to thrash. Kabuto had decided to wait an hour, so that the changes had more time to take place. When he entered, the first thing he heard was the calming peeping of the machine, telling Kabuto that Naruto's heart was still beating. But he decided to take a blood sample and checked if Naruto now had the Shikatsumyaku or if the fox had chosen the easy way out and simply burned the solution out of the boy's system. That had been his greatest worry, especially since he didn't share it with Orochimaru beforehand. If this went wrong, then Kabuto would have put Konoha on high alert for nothing. Come on Naruto, don't let me down now, he muttered as he took the blood. He immediately started to analyze it, while repeatedly muttering, please have it, please have it, please have it, please. Then he got the result. Yes. Sarutobi had called a full council meeting. The clan heads and civilians had gathered, albeit reluctantly. Hiashi spoke first. Hokage-sama, why have you called us? Sarutobi looked at him. I sent my Anbu out to make sure that this is correct, and they have confirmed my suspicion. Naruto Uzumaki is no longer inside of Konoha. The only ones who looked thunderstruck were Ichiraku and Danzo. The clan heads took the situation in with shocked face, while the civilians openly smiled. One merchant spoke up. Thank you for bringing us the good news Hokage-sama, but you could have just publicly declared it. Another shop owner nodded. True. 8 years ago, the demon was sealed and now it has left for good. Danzo face-palmed. Then he looked at Sarutobi. Could we have details? Sarutobi nodded. Of course, that's why I called the meeting. One of our Anbu patrols noticed a large amount of fresh blood in a side road in the 3rd district. He took samples and they showed to be of 3 different people. The majority of the blood was from Naruto Uzumaki, but there were 2 others. We have made a head count and found that 2 of our Chunin are missing. We have determined that the blood is theirs. The first merchant jumped up. So the demon murdered them and hid their bodies. Sarutobi shook his head. From the clotting of the blood, we have determined that Naruto bled first. By the time that the former Chunin's blood was spilled, he would have been far too weak to do anything. And you've insulted every ninja in this room and their clans, by suggesting that they would not be able to notice if a sufficient amount of demonic energy to defeat 2 Chunin were released. The merchant looked around and noticed that all clan heads were indeed glaring at him, especially the ones who prided themselves as trackers. He gulped. So those honorable Chunin tried to purge the demon and were killed by one of his demonic servants. Hiyashi looked at him, something akin to pity in his eyes. You're making a fool out of yourself. If the boy had demonic servants, why did he never use them in the 8 years that he lived here? According to some reports, he can barely keep his apartment clean, and he has been beaten every year. Danzo bit his lip. I find the most likely scenario that those 2 Chunin attacked Uzumaki and tortured him, which is not unheard of. Then someone else appeared, killed the Chunin, got rid of their bodies and abducted Uzumaki. I suggest we send a group of our hunter nin as a search party, seeing that whoever took him obviously has the skill to take out 2 Chunin without anyone noticing. Mebuki Haruno jumped up. We are trying to get the D. She noticed Sarutobi's gaze, which had grown very cold, and corrected herself mid-sentence, damned boy back. After we're finally rid of him. Why? Sarutobi's old teammates nodded, but Danzo rose from his seat. Stupid woman. That child holds the strongest Biju in existence. Do you even understand the concept behind Jinchuriki? You take a demon of uncontrollable power and seal him inside a human. The difference between sealing it in a human or sealing it in an object is simple. An object locks the power away. A human gives you the possibility to control the demon's power. Just because the boy can't control the demon yet, doesn't mean he won't learn it in the future. And now an enemy has him, and can train him to serve him. That means he could train him to destroy Konoha. If that doesn't work, he could simply bring Uzumaki close to Konoha and break the Yondaime's seal. Then the Kyuubi would be free, and I doubt it has forgotten us. Do you really wish for a repeat of what happened 8 years ago? Mebuki shivered, but she remained strong. We have the Hokage and Jiraiya, our greatest seal master and teacher of the Yondaime. Now that it has been done once, it would be easy for the 2 of them to seal it away once more. Shibi Aburame spoke, for the first time. Presuming it were possible, we have already learned that the Kyuubi can only be sealed into a child. Where would we find such a child? Shikaku snorted. He's right. After what happened to Naruto Uzumaki, nobody will offer their child for such a sealing. Why should they? So that they can see their child beaten and be shunned for giving birth to a demon. Or perhaps we mistook Mebuki and she was volunteering her child for such a sealing should the Kyuubi show up in front of our gate right now. Mebuki paled. She would never give Sakura away to have the demon sealed inside of her. But she understood one thing. Why should any parent feel other than she did? They were right, even if they could get the seal, they wouldn't have a vessel. Not even orphans were an option, since the orphanages had the right to deny usage of the children under their supervision. Shikaku took her silence as an answer. I didn't think so. Hokage-sama, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I support Danzo's suggestion. Sarutobi nodded. Any objections? There were none. Everyone was far too frightened by the idea of Kyuubi appearing again to object. Sarutobi looked around. Very well, the hunter nin will be dispatched immediately. Orochimaru looked at Kabuto, expecting positive news. And, he asked. Kabuto smiled. He survived. I checked his blood, just in case, and the results are positive. He has the bloodline. Orochimaru smiled. Excellent. We'll give him a day to recover, then we'll inject the first sample. Kabuto nodded. Which sample will we use first? Hidan's. Orochimaru frowned. No. The Kyuubi helps our procedure because he might die with his host otherwise. If we make him immortal now, it might not support any further changes, choosing to wait it out instead. We'll begin with that Iwa Nins, Didera was his name I believe, sample. By the way, have you found out anything about that clay he used? Kabuto shrugged. I analyzed it, but honestly, I was wasting my time. It's ordinary sculpting clay, although a very expensive one, nothing special about it. I'd theorize that any clay or even simple mud would work as well, but I really can't say without further research. Orochimaru nodded. If you were correct, that would be even better, since it would mean that I'd have an unlimited supply of explosives. But you have to be patient for your experiments. I don't plan on pulling Naruto out of that tank anytime soon. He'll get out when we train him, not sooner. In any case, return to Konoha so that nobody catches suspicion. Return once it's safe for you to do so. Then, while you're gone Kabuto-kun, I shall give Naruto both the Kai no Juin and the Ten no Juin to further pull him towards me. This is a fail-safe plan, Kukuku. Bad Orochimaru thought. In Orochimaru's mindscape, so my alter ego wants to do that I guess I have no choice but to wait out until my chance to escape from here permanently and be able to help Naruto-kun. Good Orochimaru announced as he plotted against his alter ego. Kabuto bowed. Understood. Sarutobi looked outside his window. It had been a week, and there was still no news about Naruto. The hunter nins had swarmed, but they had returned empty-handed. There were no traces of the boy, and nobody had seen a blonde kid with whisker marks. The reaction of his village had been a disappointment as well. They had started a celebration in response to Naruto's disappearance, setting his apartment on fire and destroying anything that belonged to him. The Ichiraku's, Konoha's best ramen shop, had closed for the duration of the celebration and openly refused to serve those who celebrated. One of the men who had tried to get served on the first day of celebration had openly stated that on such a happy day, they deserved some good ramen to celebrate the demon's disappearance. Ichiraku's daughter Ayame had swiftly reacted by taking a pot with still hot oil and poured its content over the man's head, before grabbing a hot frying pan and ordering everybody to leave within 10 seconds, or else. While that reaction warmed Sarutobi's old heart, he was still bitterly disappointed. Reactions like that should have been the rule, not the exception. Even Kakashi had taken the information with a shrug, although he had started to drink more, and seemed a lot more willing to punch people in the face. Everyone had their own way of dealing with grief. The only other person to truly miss the blonde was Hinata Hyuga. The young heir had liked the boy for a while, ever since he actually managed to prank the entire Hyuga clan and taken his punishment with a smile. She had locked herself up in her room and refused to open it for anyone. Perhaps it was time to send Kushina a long overdue letter, asking her for forgiveness for lying to her about her son. The results of that action would probably be ugly, but he couldn't take the guilt of lying to her any longer. He had kept quiet because at the time, Kushina's mental state after hearing about her husband's death had been questionable after waking up from her coma, and she might have been a danger to her child. Although he seriously doubted that Kushina would see it that way. It had taken almost a month for Kabuto to return to Orochimaru. In the meantime, the Sannin had injected 4 more samples into Naruto. The next time Kabuto saw him in his tank, the boy had mouths on his hands, his closed eyes were now rippled, and his flesh consisted of a number of black threads. However, Kabuto just could not understand why his master had injected Naruto with Sakin and Ukin's DNA samples. Orochimaru had promised to tell him at a later time. Orochimaru had also placed the Cursed Seal of Heaven and the Cursed Seal of Earth onto Naruto as well, stating that by doing so, Naruto would remain loyal to him. There were not much effects, as Kyuubi had ensured that Naruto would not die from the cursed seal placement process. Orochimaru had taken Naruto out of his tank a few times, after every procedure to be exact, to analyze him. He had also brought Karen, who had started to gain interest in medical research, to better evaluate his chakra flow. Orochimaru had discovered that while Naruto seemed to consist of nothing but threads, eyes, a heart, a brain and the 2 mouths on his palms, he still had a skeleton, which was much tougher than a normal human's. He deduced that it had something to do with the formerly injected bloodline of Kimimaro. The Kyuubi's seal had wandered to the boy's heart and engraved itself there, probably to avoid being destabilized by the constant mutations. The girl, Karen, had noted that Naruto's chakra flowed in completely different patterns every time they injected something new. At first, new chakra coils had developed in his arms, hands and palms to support the required energy for the new mouths. Then the coils around his eyes had thickened, to allow the Rinnegan to function. And now that he consisted of threads, the chakra in his body seemed unpredictable, sign there no longer were real coils. Karen had found it fascinating. Kabuto on the other hand was worried. This was all proceeding too fast for his likes. They had no idea what exactly was happening, and Kabuto was honestly worried that Naruto's body would eventually be unable to keep up with the required mutations at this pace. He had shared that worry with Orochimaru, asking him to slow the pace of new injections, but the Sannin waved him off. Apparently, he could hardly wait to have the perfect body, since he wanted to train the boy a bit before he claimed him as his own. Still, Kabuto had a bad feeling. And he would be proven right. They had injected Konan's, Suigetsu's the third Raikage's, and Mu, the second Tsuchikage's cells into him 2 hours ago, and Kabuto came to check on Naruto. The moment he entered, he felt that something was not right. The machine showed that the boy's heart rate was much higher than it should be, but still within acceptable bounds. Still, Kabuto felt that something was wrong and he looked into the tank. At first sight, he couldn't see anything out of the ordinary and turned to take a blood sample, when he noticed an anomaly. The liquid around Naruto's right knee was a bit murky. Since that knee was facing away from Kabuto, he walked around the tank to see what was wrong, and he froze. A portion of skin on the knee, as big as Kabuto's palm, was missing. A few threads were in the water, showing the naked bone. But what shocked Kabuto was that both the threads and the bone looked to be decomposing. And unlike any previous experiments, the wound was not instantly shrinking. Kabuto suspected that it was in fact getting bigger, just too slow to see it with the naked eye. He ran towards Orochimaru's chambers. Orochimaru was currently discussing medical ideas with Karen, who showed a high potential in that field of expertise, when Kabuto barged into the room, looking very flustered. Orochimaru frowned at him. "What is it, Kabuto?" Kabuto took a second to take a breath. Then he answered, panic in his voice. "Orochimaru-sama, it's Naruto. He's decomposing." Orochimaru's eyes widened. What? Kabuto's hunch had been correct. In his short absence, the hole in Naruto's knee had widened 0.5 millimeter. A short calculation gave him the result that they had roughly 4 days until he had completely decomposed, and only 2 days to save his life. Orochimaru was fuming. "What is going on?" he shouted. Kabuto shrugged. "I don't know yet, I informed you as soon as I saw the damage." "Karen, what is going on in him chakra-wise?" Karen focused, and shuddered at the demonic feeling. "An enormous amount of Kyuubi's chakra is flowing into his knee. As far as I can tell, it's trying to repair the damage. But the chakra of the cells is too chaotic for me to tell clearly what's wrong, but it feels like the internal chakra is shredding the cells, and doing it faster than Kyuubi can heal. Without that healing factor, he'd probably be dead by now, and nothing but a murky cloud in the tank in 10 minutes, tops." Orochimaru let loose killing intent that left the other two on the floor. "How and especially why is this happening? And how can we fix it?" Kabuto focused. "Orochimaru-sama, we have to take samples and analyze before we can make a deduction. With the current speed of decomposition, we have 2 days to save Naruto." The killing intent vanished and Kabuto and Karen could stand. "Then you two better not waste any time. I want results." Kabuto and Karen glanced at each other, then they hurried to pull Naruto out of the tank to take samples. "Karen, have a look at this," Kabuto said, looking up from a microscope. Karen, who despite all her talent simply didn't have the experience to discover the problem and was literally in tears, wiped her face clean and hurried to the bespectacled boy. She looked into the microscope. The cells were twisting, bending, contracting and stretching, all at the same time. Eventually the individual cells couldn't resist the strain and popped. She looked at Kabuto. "It looks like they're trying to do too many different things at once without being able to handle the strain. What could have caused it?" Kabuto scratched his head. "Let's see. He was fine the last time we checked, so what changed between then and now?" Karen frowned. "We injected 4 new samples into him. Do you think his body couldn't adapt to it?" Kabuto shook his head. "No, if he can survive having the Kekkei Genkai of the Kagaya, that alters the entire body, injected, there's no reason why he wouldn't be able to adapt to any other one. Karen sighed in frustration. We injected a sample that should turn his body into paper and another sample which would turn his body into water. And also injected the third Raikage's cells, as Orochimaru wanted his new body to be able to take any amount of damage, and to be able to split into two bodies. At which step is the problem? She drew a few sketches of how a body's transformation to paper would probably work and also how a body's transformation to water would probably work, how his skin and internals dissolved into thin sheets and then into water. Kabuto glanced at her sketching with modest interest, then he froze. His eyes widened. That's it, he stated. Karen looked at him. What's what? Kabuto pointed at her sketches. The mistake you made in those sketches are probably the reason for our problem. Karen frowned. Mistake. I find my work acceptable. Kabuto nodded. Yes, on a normal person, it would probably look like that. But Naruto is not a normal person. Karen looked at her sketches, then her eyes widened. Naruto doesn't have internal organs and flesh. His body transformed it into black threads. She whispered. Kabuto eagerly nodded. Yes, and now his cells are getting contradicting orders. Transform into thread is met by transform into sheets of paper, and further met by transform into water. The cells are trying to do all three, but they can't, so they destroy themselves while trying. Karen nodded. That sounds correct, but that leaves one question. How are you going to fix it? Orochimaru asked. Kabuto and Karen glanced at each other. Finally Karen spoke. We went through multiple scenarios, but most didn't work since it's impossible to extract the solution to undo the damage. After much debate, we came up with a solution that might work. Orochimaru raised a brow. And what would that be? Kabuto gulped. We inject him with Jugo's DNA. Orochimaru frowned. You say the problem is that the cells can't mutate into multiple things, and your solution is to add one more thing to turn into. Karen swallowed her fear. Let us explain, Orochimaru-sama. Jugo is unique since his flesh can constantly mutate into anything he wants. If we add that as a buffer, then Naruto's flesh should be able to change into threads, then into the mutating flesh and then into paper, and finally into water. He would not be able to transform completely into all three at the same time, but it should work. Orochimaru nodded. We have the genetic material, but it will take a day to change it into a solution we can inject. Let us start immediately. They had work as fast as they could, and Jugo's samples had been surprisingly unwilling to turn into the desperately needed solution, but in the end they had managed. Now they were in the room with Naruto's tank. The boy had decomposed all the way to the hip, the decomposition on his left side reaching the three lowest ribs. His fingers had also halfway eroded away by now. Kabuto injected the solution, since the arm with the catheter was thankfully still intact. Karen frowned. Nothing's happening. Kabuto took a deep breath. It takes a while for the solution to spread through the body. In an hour or two, we should be able to see results. Good ones or bad ones. Kabuto mentally added, but was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. An hour later, when he entered the room again, Kabuto was greeted with a most fortunate sight. Naruto was peacefully floating in his tank, completely intact. Kabuto felt utterly relieved. His head was safe. Orochimaru had learned from that near disaster, and said he would wait with the next solution for at least 2 months. In the meantime, they would study the samples they took to see if there was anything unusual that might endanger his future host. But everything seemed in order, Jugo's samples actually improving the entire design. Naruto now had internals and chakra coils once again, though they were not desperately needed, and his chakra had actually calmed down somewhat. That had actually solved a potential problem Orochimaru had seen with Hidan's gift. The man reflected damage to his opponents. How would Orochimaru damage the opponent's internals if he himself had none? But now Naruto had internals when he needed them, so that was no longer an issue. 2 months had passed without any sort of problem, so Orochimaru decided it was time for the next shot. But just to be careful, he had chosen the sample of the only Akatsuki member that had no physical enhancements, Sasori. The process had gone without a hitch, and Karen confirmed that something had changed. Naruto's chakra was now completely calm, flowing through his body like a strong current, but without a single obstruction or chakra spike. His control would most likely be light years above what it was before. Orochimaru smirked. Since we will make longer breaks between giving him the injections, we should begin to train him. Puppetry is not a kekkei genkei, so I want him to master it as soon as possible. They learn better when they start young. Kabuto nodded. Honestly, he was itching to find out what the boy could do. They had already organized a number of puppets, and materials for human puppets, together with a few corpses of mid-class shinobi. They wouldn't give away a precious corpse until they knew that it would be a success. Kabuto looked at Karen, who had been ordered to take care of Naruto together with him. This will probably be quite tiring. Karen raised a brow. Why? All we have to do is teach him how to form chakra strings, and give him motivation for figuring the rest out. Kabuto sighed. That would work, right up to the point where we want him to make a human puppet. Karen tilted her head. Why? We give him the scroll and wait till self-preservation makes him overcome any morals of cutting up corpses. Kabuto face-palmed. The boy was an outcast in his village, what on earth makes you think he can read? Karen gaped. The kid is 8, and he can't read. Kabuto just nodded his head. She groaned. Great, so we have to teach him how to read. Kabuto shrugged. Looks like it. But for now, we have to get him out and wake him up. They pulled him out of the tank, removed the mask that had supplied oxygen and a tranquilizer. Kabuto grimaced. Remind me to request that this thing is cleaned more often. It hasn't been off once since we originally put it on. Kabuto stated as he dropped it onto the floor. Karen took 5 steps back. Ew. Kabuto, please clean his face. Without the Kyuubi, he probably would have died from infection by now. I'll wait for you in his designated training room. Looks like I'll have to get some books too. Some stuff for beginners, but the majority will be medical texts. They'll be better when he reads the scroll anyways. Kabuto waved his acknowledgement and carried Naruto to get washed and dressed. When he brought Naruto, now dressed in a simple shirt and pants, into the designated room, Karen was already waiting for him. Kabuto dropped Naruto on the makeshift bed, a pile of hay. Then they started discussing what they'd do with the boy. Orochimaru wanted results, but he wouldn't get those if the boy couldn't read the instructions. Their thoughts were interrupted by a groan. They turned their heads and saw Naruto twitch. Then, for the first time in over a month, Naruto Uzumaki opened his eyes. Naruto slowly opened his eyes. He was in a room that seemed literally split. It seemed friendly at first, it was clean, the colors were bright and the straw he was laying on was better than some of the other things he had used as beds, especially the one in the orphanage with all the springs that Naruto had noticed were regularly sharpened sticking out. The dark part of the room was the far end, since instead of a wall with a door, all there was were bars that seemed to glow. He was in a prison. How do you feel? A voice asked. Naruto turned his head and saw 2 people sitting on chairs. One was a girl roughly his age with glasses and long red hair, the other one was that Kabuto that had knocked him out. How long had he been out? A few hours, a day, or more. If he only knew. Another weird thing was that both were surrounded by a weird haze. The girl's haze seemed to be sizzling, while Kabuto's was somewhat strained. He looked at them. Where am I? Why are there glowing bars on the wall? And what is that stuff around you? The 2 looked at each other with raised brows. Then Kabuto spoke. I'll answer your first and second question later, although I might add that the bars are not glowing. As for your third question, it's called air. We breathe it. Aside from that, there's nothing there. Do you see something else? Naruto looked at them as if they had lost their minds, though it was hard to tell with the emotionless eyes of the Rinnegan. Only the weird mist thing surrounding you too. How can you not see it? It's right in front of you. A second ago, yours seemed kinda strained while hers, he pointed at the girl, was sizzling or boiling or something like that. Now both of yours are just going in swirls. The 2 looked at each other again, another unseen conversation going between them. Then Karen spoke. Since I'm a sensor, I can tell that there's chakra in the bars from the seals, and that we are surrounded by our chakra. Maybe that's what you're seeing. Naruto looked at her. I could never see chakra, so why now? And who are you? Why am I here? Karen blinked. That's right, I haven't introduced myself yet, have I? My name is Karen, you already know Kabuto. We're working for someone, I doubt you've heard of him, his name is Orochimaru. Naruto frowned. Yes, it does ring a bell. Again, why am I here? He tried to jump up, but he misjudged the length of his legs and fell to the floor. Karen looked at Kabuto. They'd have to teach him how to walk as well. Then again, the boy had grown with the nutrients he received, and he hadn't moved for over a month. It was no wonder that his brain hadn't adjusted to the longer limbs yet. It was amazing that his muscles still functioned this well after a month in a tank. Kabuto sighed. You shouldn't try to move that much, you've been out for a while and your mind needs to adjust to your body. As for why you're here, it's kinda complicated. For now, all you need to know is that you have to stay here a while, and that Karen and I are going to teach you a few things, reading amongst them. Karen looked at Kabuto. You're forgetting medicine and anatomy. He'll learn the basics of that, as he'll need it later. Kabuto shrugged, bored. I know. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First he has to learn to read, and how to form chakra strings. Naruto looked at the two people. So, you plan on teaching me? Why? Huh? Seriously? You want to teach me those skills, when I already know them? Naruto internally exclaimed. However, he decided to play along, in order to see their motives. The two shared a look, and a sweat drop. Kabuto cleared his throat. Let's just say we're under orders to turn you into a shinobi, and you'll gain the ability of a puppeteer, a rare but very useful talent. Naruto raised a brow. Puppets. How is that supposed to help? He had concluded that in his current situation, there was no way out for him. If he wanted to get out, he'd have to go along with their plans and look for a good chance to escape. He didn't know it, but Sasori's cells had done more than just improve his chakra control. It had also raised his IQ by a good amount, and it had already been above average due to his previous training with Sasori. Naruto now had the mental resources of a pure genius. Karen shrugged. There are special combat puppets. The size of a human, and usually stuffed with all sorts of nasty surprises. Okay, now that that's cleared, let's start with the chakra strings first. Reading later, and learning how to move without falling over your own feet could probably be helpful as well. She and Kabuto had already clearly outlined the do's and don'ts of Naruto's training. Puppeteering, yes, that was why they were here. Medicine and anatomy, yes, as they needed him to be able to make human puppets, and he had to understand enough from the scroll to not seriously up. Usage of the mouths on his hands, yes, as it was not only interesting, but it was also the part Naruto was bound to notice in a short amount of time. Learning how to turn his body into strings and control his bone structure, maybe later. Teaching him how to transform into sheets of paper, no, they didn't need that yet, and the seals on the bars hadn't been modified to create a barrier yet. If the boy escaped through the bars, Orochimaru would play bowling with their heads. The Rinnegan, no. They really didn't need Naruto taking the place apart, or fling them through the air like leaves in a storm. And as if on cue, Naruto looked at his hands, probably wondering how he'd make the strings. It seemed that way to both Karen and Kabuto, but Naruto was just looking over his hands. He gasped in shock. Why are there mouths on my hands? He shouted. Kabuto sighed. I was hoping you'd take a little longer to notice them. Those mouths are a Kekkei Genkai, a ability unique to clans. They are something only people with DNA like yours can use. You can't eat food with them, as they're not connected to your stomach, and you can't talk with them, as they have no vocal cords, or connections with the lung. Naruto stared at his hands. What did they do? Karen coughed. We're not entirely sure yet. What we do know for certain is that you can animate clay into moving figures that explode with a great force by letting your hands chew it. What we don't know is if you're restricted to clay or can use anything of the nature, like mud. Naruto looked at his hands. So one of my parents had these too? He asked. Naruto did not know if either of his parents had this ability, as Sasori did not tell him about them, even if he knew about them. Kabuto and Karen glanced at each other. Maybe. We honestly have no idea, but it's possible. It was. They just didn't say how likely it was. Naruto nodded. Okay. Since I seem to have little choice either way, let's start. Karen nodded, waved him closer to the table with the scrolls, and they started. The next weeks passed quickly for Kabuto and Karen. Naruto was an amazing student if you could answer his questions. He only needed something explained once to memorize it, and his imagination was almost scary. Not only could he come up with ingenious and crazy plans, but he could picture things to a mind-baffling degree, as he only needed to look at the pieces for a minute to put a 1,000-piece puzzle together, without making a single mistake or a moment's hesitation. Teaching Naruto kanji had also been much easier than Karen had feared, and from the way they were going through the scrolls, he'd probably knew enough to become a mediocre doctor in a few weeks. Forming chakra strings had taken an instant to learn. The boy could instantly summon them, this due to his experience with puppetry. He could not form the chakra string instantly before, as his chakra control was not good enough. Not now he could do so due to Sasori's cells. They had also found time to test out Deidara's bloodline. It turned out that Naruto could use any type of earth in an at least semi-liquid state as explosives, even wet sand worked. But it couldn't be dry dirt, and there was some sort of order for the effectiveness of the explosives. Deidara's clay worked best, seeing that it was of a high quality. Clay in general seemed to be the most effective material for the bombs, while mud and wet dirt were not as good. Orochimaru had been patient, understanding that rushing the puppeteering without Naruto being able to understand what he was supposed to do would be a waste of time and effort. Also, the room where Naruto would train puppetry had to be prepared, and the corpses of mid-class shinobi that had been gathered for human puppets had been sealed into scrolls, then organized according to their elemental affinity. They had also gathered corpses of renowned cages. Such cages included the third Raikage, the second Tsuchikage, the second Mizukage, and all of Konoha's Hokages. All this were done discreetly, lest the hidden villages found out, and sent search parties, which would be very troublesome. Now it was time to teach Naruto puppeteering, before he would receive Itachi's sample. Who knows, the Sharingan might actually make it easier for the boy. They had prepared a training room for Naruto, and already used the trusted sedatives to knock him out. Now all they had to do was wait. Naruto woke up with a small headache. He looked around to find himself in a new room. He was laying in a new pile of hay, but beside that, the room was different. It seemed colder, and instead of a table where Kabuto and Karen were waiting for him, he saw a large workbench filled with parts of puppets and other materials. On the other side, there seemed to be a table for operations including scalpels and other medical instruments. There were a few medical scrolls and one that said human puppetry. The opposite wall was another set of bars, but there was an opening. Not big enough to slip through, but his arms would fit through. Behind the bars, there was a man-sized puppet laying on the floor, while to the far wall Naruto could see a table with food and a jug on a stone basin filled with water, everything far beyond his reach. He immediately understood that if he wanted to eat and drink, he had to make the puppet get it for him. He immediately extended chakra strings to the puppet, only to see them bounce off an invisible barrier inside the opening. What the? He muttered. Had he been wrong? No, it made sense. Perhaps the barrier had been made to prevent Naruto from cheating, like assembling a long straw for water or something. Like that. He approached the opening and reached for it. Nothing happened, so Naruto stuck his arms in the opening and tried again. This time, the strings connected to the puppet without a problem. He then proceeded to guide the puppet to move and take the food and water for him, while purposely making the puppet stumble during the process, so as to hide his skill. Kabuto and Karen looked into one of Orochimaru's observation monitors. It had almost been 2 days, but Naruto had succeeded in moving the puppet to supply himself with food and water. And to their satisfaction, after he had eaten and drunk, Naruto continued to tinker with the puppet. They would inject Itachi's sample into him soon, and the better the boy was with the puppets, the better he'd get in the future. Right now, the puppet is almost as agile as a normal civilian, just a little stiff. They'd also need the time to redecorate the training chamber for puppeteering. They had developed a clever schedule that would turn Naruto into a puppeteer that even Sasori would respect. Right now they were working with him on multiple levels. The room where they taught him to read and the room where he worked with puppets were connected through a tunnel, so that Naruto could work on reading with them, and on puppets in the other room. Soon Naruto would build his first human puppet, however, it was time to inject him with Itachi's cells. Naruto looked around. He was in the room for puppeteering, but things had changed. The connection to the other room was blocked, and his given puppet was missing. There were materials for a puppet, but something was off. The operating table seemed to be polished, the medical instruments more numerous and a number of other devices of unknown function standing around it. On the workbench, there was a small stack of scrolls, and another note. He opened it. Again, you have what you need. To understand what you're supposed to do, read the scroll labeled, Human Puppets. The traps have been deactivated while you get used to the new puppet. Also, you have 1 gallon of water, a small loaf of bread and 3 fruits as provisions for the time during the making of the puppet. Naruto frowned. What was this supposed to mean? He knew about sealed objects, Kabuto had told and even showed him, but what could be in those scrolls that was different from what had been on the workbench beforehand? He decided to go for the scroll with the instructions first. He grabbed it, opened it and began to read. His eyes wandered down the lines, his face split into a grin the further he read. After 10 minutes, he was smiling away like a madman. He had read the entire scroll. He grabbed one of the scrolls on the workbench, unrolled it on the operating table and unsealed what it held. He was not surprised to see a human body laying on the table before him, although he was shocked to see that the body looked to have been barely 16. Dark skin and long black hair was spread around his head like a black hole. Naruto decided he had to act for a little while, so as to continue deceiving Orochimaru and the others. With that thought in mind, Naruto resealed the corpse, tears in his eyes, as he looked around the room, to let observers see his tearful eyes. Naruto also noted that there was several devices in the room. The devices in the room had the following functions: draining the body of blood and other liquids, making skinning the body easier, a special bone saw for the skull. The scalpels were so that he could remove the innards and replace it with the materials for a puppet. Everything made perfect sense in a very familiar way. Thanks to the scroll, his lessons, and his experience with having made a human puppet before on his training with Sasori, he knew exactly what to do to make a human puppet. The only thing he was lacking was practice, which was probably the reason there were so many scrolls. In case he didn't get it right, he would have more to work on. Naruto slumped together next to the operating table, leaning against the wall for support while he buried his face in his hands. What was he supposed to do now? He was finding it harder and harder to keep up his act. "How's he doing?" Kabuto asked without looking up from his medicine book. He was studying some medical plants for the near future. Karen looked up from her medical texts to glance at the screen. Still no change. He's just sitting next to the table, staring into blank space. He should get started soon. He ran out of provisions a day ago. Naruto had been in there for almost 4 days now. On occasions, he had stood up, ate, looked at the instructions for making a human puppet, taken some instruments into his hands or stared at the scrolls with the bodies. But he had not done anything. Yet, this was in order to keep up his act, as he had planned. But they knew it wouldn't be long until the boy caved into thirst. The fact that water flowed into the chalice making soft noise that would be maddening in the silence of the chamber was wearing the thirsty boy down quickly. And indeed, Karen saw that Naruto had grabbed a scroll and placed the corpse on the operating table. He checked the instructions again, before moving to attach the dehydrator to the body. Then he grabbed a scalping knife and some other gimmicks for removing skin they had supplied him with. Naruto didn't want to do it yet, but the thirst was killing him. And the corpse wouldn't care what happened with it, since Naruto knew whoever was the mastermind in the background would just bury them if he refused to do it and died. That was the main reason he moved to turn the corpse into a puppet. He simply didn't want to die. It was the same boy he had unsealed before. When he touched the dead boy's head, he blinked in shock. He had just flashed through a number of images, gaining knowledge about this poor soul. This boy, his name was Kira, he was, or had been, a low chunin of Kumo. His dream had been to become the strongest and best Raiden user in the world. He knew a few Raiden and chakra control exercises, but besides that, Naruto didn't get much else. Only that the boy had died from a senbon, probably poisoned, to the neck, dying alone without even getting close to fulfilling his dream. What was that? He mentally asked himself. Unknown to himself and the others, Naruto had subconsciously just used the Rinnegan's abilities for reading minds to read the dead boy's memories. These memories would stay in Naruto's memory however. After a moment's hesitation, during which Naruto used to store away the information for future use, Naruto started peeling off the skin. Kabuto whistled, impressed with the boy. He had managed to keep his stomach's content, albeit barely, and was making pretty good progress. Of course Kabuto couldn't see all the details of what was happening, but what he saw made him believe that Naruto seemed determined to get it right on his first try. Probably for some sense of duty to ensure the boy didn't die in vain or something, but if it motivated Naruto, who was he to complain? After another hour, Naruto was done. The first human puppet the boy had ever made was laying before him. In a fit of inspiration, Naruto had done some things that weren't written in the scroll, just to see if it worked. He extended the strings and Kira moved. It was a bit different than a normal puppet, but Naruto could move him and would probably quickly learn to master using him. He gently pushed it through the lower opening and made it get him food and water. Then the puppet returned to him, and Naruto fell asleep, dead tired. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this and hit the notification bell, so you never miss an upload. See you next time.